Thank you for coming out tonight. It is Tuesday, February 7th, 2012, and we are now going to start the budget work session of the North Kingstown School Committee. If everyone could please rise to say the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It is in the corner. Yeah. All right. One of the things that has just been pointed out to me and that I had seen earlier is that citizens' comments is at the end of the agenda. However, we will make sure that we bring citizens' comments up before we take any vote here tonight. So don't worry, your vote won't be, your comments will not come after we vote. Lorene, if you could please call the roll.
Linda Avanzado.
Here.
Mel Boyd Benson.
Here.
John Buscardin.
Here.
Larry Cerisi.
Here.
William Mudge.
Yes, here.
Kimberly Page.
Here.
Richard Welch.
Here.
Julia Held. Brenton Bowley, student representative.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Auger and the rest of the committee, I guess my first question would be, do we want to have Dr. Auger speak first with his report and go into the budget and then have citizens' comments, or where would you like to place them?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
before we do that, I would like to mention that one of our longtime employees lost his father, Mr. Leo Green. So could we stop and have a minute of silence for Leo Green and his family?
Yes, we may. So if the committee would take a moment of silence, please, for Leo Green and his family. All right, thank you very much, everyone. All right, so from the head nodding that I saw, it sounds like that's what we will do then, is we will have the superintendent's report, and then right after the report, we will have citizens' comments. I would encourage people to make sure that you sign up on the paper that's up here on the, I guess you call it the adjunct stage, just so that you aren't forgotten. That way, we do have to keep record of who comes up to speak in the microphone. If you don't get a chance to sign up and then you realize midway through the comments that there is something you would like to say, we will not prohibit you. We will still allow you to come up. So we do want to remind everyone, though, that we ask for a 3-minute limit on citizens' comments because we could potentially have a lot of people who are coming to speak, and so we want to make sure that everybody has equal time in being able to speak. So,
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Mudge.
Last time we met, we went over this budget, and a couple of people made some recommendations. We all didn't have a chance to address those, so I'm kind of interested in the format in terms of, especially before the folks in the audience have an opportunity to speak. I'd like to get an outline of what Dr. Auger's presentation is going to be for the meeting, because I think there's some certain things we need to look at, and I'd like to understand what the presentations. I'm not sure you're going to give the whole presentation or part of it, or I do have some questions that I would like addressed before you offer the entire budget and go through all 42 items. So, again, I'm not sure what you're prepared to do. And how
Dr. Auger, did you have any suggestion? I was prepared to let you go with everything.
Prepared to discuss all of the phases of this budget as it's presented and answer any questions that you may have.
As you go along, good.
Sure.
Good.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as the superintendent had recommended and what's actually outlined in our agenda, if we could just have the superintendent give his presentation on his recommendations up until this point, and then obviously we can have Q&A from committee members and a possible vote I would hope that we could follow that process and let the superintendent get through his presentation before we open up for Q&A.
Mrs. Treese?
Okay, why don't we, the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report, so Dr. Ajay, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I realize this is probably not the kind of meeting that most people would want to come to on a night like this, but it is important information. It's important to the future of our school department, and I really appreciate you being here to advocate for the programs that you feel are important. Yesterday, I sent out a spreadsheet that indicated a number of cuts that we would have to make in our general budget to get to a point where we have a balanced budget for next year. We have looking at a 4% local tax increase, which is as high as can happen, and that's figuring that a 4% increase comes to the school department as well. That is the budget I am proposing this evening to get to that number, 58,737,012. This would mean that in real dollars compared to what we're doing this year and the costs that have gone up in a year, that it would mean that we have to cut $1.421019, $1,421,000 from our operating budget. And I have put together, and many of you have probably seen through the email that I sent yesterday, kind of a color-coded sheet. The first color is green, and that color is the color that indicates a 4% local tax increase. And under those items, and I explained much of this last time, so I'll kind of go through these things relatively quickly. I just want to start off by saying I don't consider the green area something that is easy to do. Right now, we have a budget where I feel everything that we're doing in this department is something that is needed. Every person, every program is something that I can legitimately say, I feel we need that to do our mission right. So even this first piece, which I am advocating for, will not be easy. But I also feel that we have done enough looking at this that there are things here that we can live with, that we can still go through the educational mission of this district in a very positive way with the cuts that are made in the green area. The yellow area indicates what would happen if we have a 2% increase from the town. That means another $800,000 attached onto this number. So now the number is about $2.2 million. And in the red is a 0% increase if we are level funded consistent with last year. And that would mean add another $800,000. So now we're around $3 million in cuts. While it appears that there's a lot of discretion on this stage to make a lot of different moves, considering we have a budget that's around $60 million. In reality, there's really about 12 or 13 million in areas that we really have some discretion. And when I say discretion, I mean it's something that I can affect without some kind of major negotiation or a reworking of a contract. So I'm going to talk about some of these things first, and then I'm going to talk about what I'd like to send as a message to the town council. That if the town council, which is the authority that gives us the money to do this work, if they go to 2% or 0, what would it look like? In the 4% range, we're looking at cuts to professional development. Number 2 is a severance cut, which is relatively probably the easiest thing on the list to make. We're looking at enrollment, and we see in 6th grade there's an opportunity, one teacher at Davisville Middle School and one teacher at Wickford Middle School, because the enrollment in that particular grade is down. So we can, make a couple of cuts there. We also have a .5 librarian at North Kingstown High School and a library clerk at North Kingstown High School. As been explained in previous meetings, those are not easy to make. Unfortunately, they become areas that are easier than a classroom teacher who has a responsibility for a set number of kids on a regular schedule, where I cannot necessarily pull a math teacher as easily as a librarian, just because of the way state mandates work and the way schedules work. I'm looking to reorganize the athletic director position. Right now, it's an administrative-type position, one person working the whole job. This would cut the job up into a part-time person overseeing the high school with a part-time helper and 2 people who would oversee each of the middle schools, mostly teachers who receive a stipend to do this work, and that would save us a great deal, $54,000. I'm looking at an enrichment section at Davisville Middle School. This is a class that a student would have as an elective that they would take to help them in English or math. And I've worked with Mrs. Logan, and she feels that if there is a transfer to a technology section, she could manage to do without one section of physical education and one section of enrichment. And that's what those next 2 items are, numbers 8 and 9. Number 10 is actually not a cut, it is a transfer. And that is a clerk who does some help with guidance and some help with the office at Davisville Middle School, and that would be transferred to the front office at Quidnesset Elementary, which is in desperate need of more clerical help. We have already done this, but it is not in effect in this year's budget yet, and in next year's budget yet, and that is reducing the supervisor of physical plant to half a .5 FTE. We just received word from the governor that in his proposal, and we kind of expect that this will probably take, is that we will be on the hook for about $20,000 more worth of non-public textbooks. That's a government recommendation. We expect that to pass. That also reminds me, the last meeting you came to, the number was almost $1.6 million. We also, the message from the governor was good news in that we received about $138,000 more in state aid. So that's why the number this session is 1.421. So we were 138 to the good and then 20 to the bad with the governor's recommendation. So we still come out a little better than where we were a couple of weeks ago. I'm looking at 2 paraprofessional staff district-wide to be cut from our ranks. We currently, I'm going to say, have roughly in the neighborhood of 90. I'm looking at, and this was something that was based on last meeting, I believe Mr. Cerisi brought this up, looking at bringing the CIP funding to 2011 levels. That is $87,000 worth of funding there that can be moved to our general budget. However, there's a caution flag in that note box, because we have said many times that we don't feel that our capital improvement fund is necessarily well funded as it is. We have looked at this as another item that Mrs. Cerisi brought up last time, looking at supplies to 2011 levels. I kept $60,000 of that particular number for diesel fuel. We're realizing that diesel fuel is going up significantly, and it's even biting us a little bit this year. I moved that back by about $60,000, but that's still a savings of $225,000. We have removed a bus from the regular education routes, and with the word to Mr. Horan to go about things with one less bus. And that would mean to redo some routes, to find ways. It will probably mean that some kids are on the bus longer, some routes are longer, but it will, we're going to have to make do. And there's one of those at each level. The next item, number 17, transfer transitional students from perspectives. We currently have students who we outsource to the Perspectives organization. These are students who have significant special needs, and they are getting job training. They're usually 18 or 19 years old. These are students that we can bring back using available space at Davisville Elementary School, and I am told from Mrs. Santa that this will be a savings of $100,000 to the district, and in future years could be significantly more than that because there's a greater population of those students that we would not have to outsource. As has been discussed on this stage many times, I think many people understand that we are currently in negotiations with the North Kingstown ESP, and in this particular package of reductions, I am looking at the potential for about $430,000 of savings to the district but that is a negotiated item. That is not something that, even though we will vote on it tonight, it is dependent upon negotiations. And that number could be a lot of different things depending on, how arbitration ends and what would happen after that. The next item, I mentioned this a few times on the stage and in the letters that I've written to the community. I feel there is a desperate need in our district to help elementary support reading and math base and a social worker in our district. We only have 2 social workers in our district. Many districts our size have many more than that, and so I'm trying to increase that number at least by 1 this year. So this would be an area where I see, because of the enrollment and the way it works at different grade levels, I can find 2 classroom teachers that I don't necessarily need to have, and I can transfer those jobs to a social worker and a reading or math support person. And that would be something that we would look at over the course of the spring and the summer and look at the population of kids that we're serving and make a decision. Is this all math? Is it all reading? Is it, half and half? We kind of leave that until we know for sure, and I have Dr. Humbert and the elementary principals look at that closely and determine what we would need. The next item is an early retirement incentive offset with fund balance. Mr. Draper, can you explain that one just a little bit? That it's not an item in the cuts column necessarily. It's something that we need to post.
Correct. When our recent review, BEP review, is conducted by Watervik, one of the comments they had in the process of gathering data was we had an early retirement incentive that was done a few years ago, and the health care cost for that was applied to our fund balance. He recommended that be presented in the budget documentation so it's clear to everybody that that's an expense we have, even though it is against fund balance and it's not against our current year's revenues. It's something we need to make clear. So that's why that's been added in the sheet, and it'll be in the budget document moving forward.
Is it an expense?
Yes.
So is it expense going to realize this year?
Yes.
So it'll increase our budget then by that amount, right?
For FY13, it'll increase the budget by the $135,000, but there'll be a revenue.
That's the GHGRI that was in the...
No, this is
Okay, good point.
this is a school committee action.
The next item is, we talked about this last time, the removal of the dues that this board currently pays to the National School Board Association at $4,000. Those all come together to $1.421019, and that would be a level budget if we were to receive a 4% increase from the town, which is what I am proposing to the school committee this evening. And on the next page are the yellow and red areas. Yellow signifying a 2% local tax support increase. And this is where it starts to get really dicey and a bit drastic. These are areas...
Dr. O'Shea,
Sure.
I think you skipped number 6.
I'm sorry.
And I just wanted to make sure that if people had any questions about the 1.6 teacher electives.
Okay,
that
yeah,
you'd
I'm sorry
explain
about
what
that. The 1.6 teacher North Kingstown High School electives, that is something I've talked with Dr. Kenworthy about, and what we would try to do is to find 8 classes, 8 elective classes at the high school level. not necessarily AP classes or music classes or art classes, but really any classes that could fall into those areas. It could fall into a section of foreign language. It would probably end up falling into a lot of different kinds of subjects where there's a .2 here and a .2 there. .2 signifying what 1/5 of a teacher's job, and therefore one section of one class. This would not include your English, math, social studies, science, that sort of thing. It would be from areas that currently are running but are low enrolled. In some cases at the high school, there may be a few classes that are running with, say, 12 to 15 students. And it would be those kinds of areas that we would target and do everything we can to make, one very large class with the possibility of a couple of students not even getting to take the class in that current year. They may have to wait a year, as opposed to running two kind of medium or small-sized classes. That's what that represents. It's not taking away any programs. It's just making sure that we utilize, the class cap capacity as much as we possibly can.
Dr. O'Jay,
Yes, Mrs. Benton. Yes.
what is the class cap capacity?
I believe it's 28 students in a class?
28?
28. At the high school, yes.
Okay, I'd save the rest of our questions, and Dr. Ajay, why don't you continue on with the
Okay.
yellow and red?
In the yellow and red, these are areas, you can all read what they are. I'm going to go through them, but this is the area where I feel it really becomes significant for all of us to be very vocal about this and to express what we need, particularly to the town council, who is the authority that gives us the money. There are, when I think about my vision for this district, and I think many of you in the audience share this vision, it is a school district that has many programs that run during the day that are outstanding, and the academic work is outstanding, but it also includes a lot of afternoons and nights and weekends and kids in music programs and drama programs and in sports programs. And doing all, and you think about all of the clubs that we have at this high school and in our middle schools, and the things that we have honored students for, physics clubs and science olympiads, and all the wonderful things that kids get engaged in. That's why they want to come to school, to be engaged, to be a part of the community. It brings all of us out to the community as well. In a few weeks, my kids are going to be involved in the Footloose musical. What a tremendous experience that is for them. So I see this as a parent, and I know all of you do too. This is as important as the English and the math. But as I said earlier, there are certain things I have discretion over, or we have discretion over, and certain things that we don't. We cannot tell a student that they're not going to take English in a particular year, whereas we have some authority to affect how much we do of sports and after-school clubs and that sort of thing. That's why these things have to come up at this point. There are very few other places to go, if any. So if we go to that extra $800,000, and this is not in any particular order or rating or anything, this is the grouping of the kinds of things that we would need to do. We would be looking at an elementary music teacher, which would basically mean 22 and 23 taken together, mean that we take elementary music out of the elementary school day schedule and we pull it to after school. I have talked with the elementary school teachers, the music teachers in our district about this, and they feel this could be problematic to us, that there will be fewer students who would be in line to be musicians in the middle level and the high school level. And as you know, we have as great a music program in this district as anywhere in the state of Rhode Island. If you ever get a chance to come and see a concert here, it will blow you away. They are so talented. And it's important not only for the enrichment of our community and our students, but it's important budgetarily as well. When you think about Tony Silvera is here this evening, and the classes that she teaches, she can sometimes get 80 kids in a classroom at one time. A math teacher gets at most 28. So when you think about how we're spending our money, not that the kids don't have to take math, but you get the idea. If those kids go to non-music electives, I now have them in 3 classrooms with 3 different teachers instead of 1 classroom with 1 teacher. So there is a budgetary issue to having a lot of students involved in music. We also know, it is a fact, kids who are getting involved in after-school activities, whether they be music or sports, they do better in school. They're just more engaged. They're not hanging out. So there's a lot of benefit to this. It isn't just a financial number. The e-portfolio from the proficiency-based graduation requirements. We have 2 proficiency-based graduation requirements of the high school, and we're very proud of them. One is the senior project, one is the electronic portfolio. We also have a program where we have students taking common assessments, and the students, as part of the electronic portfolio, have to pass a certain number of common assessments and store them in their portfolio and make a presentation when they're done. What this would effectively do is get rid of the electronic component for the portfolio. That's roughly about $24,000 of this, and get rid of the coordinator of that program and how students engage with that program. And that's a teacher's job. And what it would replace it with, we still have this requirement by the Department of Education, we would replace it with something that is more of, the assessments, and that being overseen by, guidance and department heads and that sort of thing, and students would have to pass a number of these assessments just like they would have to pass a number of classes to graduate, but you wouldn't need the electronic portfolio piece of it, and that what the high school would be forced to do is make do without the coordinator, which would be difficult. It's doable, but it is difficult, and it's not something that we would want to do if just given the choice. We'd like more time to work on something like this and to really make these kinds of decisions because they're good for students academically and not just because we don't have the cash. The next 2 items, middle school sports and freshman sports, and I'll take the next item with that. And hockey at the high school, boys and girls tennis, gymnastics, boys and girls swimming, boys and girls golf. Those items were chosen. Why those first? Those items were chosen because they relative to other sports, they are high in the expenditure column and lower in the participation column. That's why those are listed there and not some other sports. So we've taken into account how much it costs to run the sports. We've also taken into account how much revenue a sport would bring in and the number of students participating in that sport. We tried to pick based on those. It wasn't because I have a personal like or dislike for any particular sport. So those, if we only have to go to a 2% tax increase, those would be included in that list. We would, again, reduce a bus. We would, again, look for concessions through our negotiation process with the North Kingstown ESP. We would reduce middle school and high school school music program, after-school music program by 25%. So 25% of the after-school work that music teachers are doing with their students, whether it's concerts or marching in the parade, 25% of that will be pulled back. We would remove the student planners, which we currently spend about $5,000. It's a terrific tool to help kids be organized. Those would have to go. We would reduce custodial services by two people. And that would mean we just have a tougher time, particularly on weekends and evenings, of making sure our buildings are clean. There would be more days when trash cans don't get emptied and floors don't get swept, and those sorts of things that we count on a regular basis would not happen. We'd really have to spread that around. We would look at 4 paraprofessional positions. Again, as you recall, this past year, I added paraprofessional positions, and I told this committee that I couldn't do the job without them. So I'm going to have a real hard time finding more positions to cut. But it would become a necessity, because there's just no other places to go. We would also look at reducing maintenance services by a person. So again, the maintenance of our buildings, the cleanliness of our buildings, those things would be compromised by going to a 2% budget. If we go to the red with a 0% budget, it gets really awful. Number 35 is basically all of the other athletics that I didn't cover in the yellow area, those would go. All of the clubs that we currently have for after-school programs that we pay stipends to teachers to run, those would go. This would not look like the same district that we have grown accustomed to. I cannot imagine this school district without these kinds of things. I cannot imagine it happening. And it has been the most difficult job of my life trying to figure out how to get this done without including those kinds of things. We have an energy manager. That person saves us a lot of money by doing a lot of efficiencies work around the district. We would cut that person's stipend. Because we don't have much going on after school anymore, we wouldn't need a late bus, so the late bus would go. The after-school resource program at the middle school and the high school would go. The more paraprofessionals would go. We would look at special education services by 0.8 at the high school, where special educators would have more students on their caseload. We currently pay some of our guidance counselors some extra hours to come in over the summer because it's very difficult to get the job without them there in the summer. It's not huge money, but it's something that we really need, and I'm sure they will tell me that it will be almost impossible to get the job done without their summer work, but we're going to have to try to do it anyway. We're looking at reductions in clerical and custodial overtime, more reductions in custodial services. Again, the buildings are not as clean, they're not as well kept, all of that. The last item there is a removal of NEASC. We are currently an accredited member of the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. This is a program that we spend a great deal of money for, not necessarily next year when we just have a regular year for our dues, but the year after that when we have a visit. That is a team of people, approximately 10 or so, that come, and to the cost of this district, we are putting them up for lodging and food for a better part of a week. And the cost of writing that document, of doing all that work, gets pretty expensive, to about $30,000. Those things are things I cannot imagine this district doing without. You know, as someone put it in a letter today, it's the heart and soul of our district. That's what we're getting hit with when we get to this area. I know that our town council has certainly got its work cut out for it this year. All over the papers last week were there issues that they're having with other parts of their management, including the firefighters, for instance. And there are no easy answers to what they're doing. There are, all over the state. You can just read the Providence Journal on any given day, and you'll see all kinds of news about towns having to deal with these kinds of major problems. But what I hope you can help me to do is to let our town council know not to forget about this budget and our schools. This is what makes North Kingstown great, this school system. It is something that drove me to this district. When I moved here about 16 years ago, my kids have been a part of this system. I've seen it as a parent. I've seen it as an educator. It is a great school district. We do remarkable things here in every phase of it. We have extremely very talented kids, and we have a tremendous staff. And I just want to end by saying that I hope I have your support to do all you can to convince our town to support us to a 4% tax increase. Even that will be very difficult to live with. And I think our taxpayers are right, to a certain extent, to demand us to tighten our belts and to make sure we're using their money well. I don't have any problems with that. And I think cutting $1.4 million from our budget definitely shows this community that we are committed to that. But we also need to show our community that we are committed to putting the best product in front of our kids. We do remarkable things in this district. We have remarkable state test scores. We have remarkable teams. We have remarkable programs in every facet. And I'd like to keep it that way. And I hope you do too. I encourage you tonight to come to the mic, say your piece, talk about the programs that are meaningful to you. I would also hope that if you see areas that I would imagine a lot of people are going to advocate for certain things that are on this cuts list. I hope you can come forward as well with other suggestions, whether it's in an email to me or to members of the school committee, or to members of the town council about other areas they think you think we can save some money. Because I've taken a lot of your suggestions into account. And a lot of things that I've gotten through emails have made it to this list. So I'm listening. And I know the members of the school committee are listening too. The members of the school committee are here every couple of weeks, and they're in our schools, and they know what's going on. I think they get this, whereas the town council, they have a lot of other responsibilities. And I'm not saying they do not have a concern for their schools. I'm sure that they do. But they need to know, they need to be educated more so than this group, I believe. And I'm committed to doing that, and I hope I have your support in that. So my proposal this evening will be to approve this recommendation of a 4% tax increase and all that goes along with it, items 1 through 21, and to include in the document that we sent to the town council, page 2, which would show them what it would mean to go to 2% local tax support or a 0% increase, because they need to understand what those numbers mean. It's easy to talk numbers. It's a lot harder to talk about what it means to our kids and our community. Thank you.
Mr. Welch and Mr. Cerisi, and then we'll start at the other end of the table.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Auger. All of us on this committee are well concerned and don't take this responsibility lightly, as I know you and the rest of the administration do. We have a responsibility to protect the educational program in our community, which is exemplary, and we know that because of the awards our students constantly win, both statewide and nationally. It is with great regret that I'm going to make the following motion, which all of us up here, being taxpayers, will feel the pain, just like anyone else in the audience that is a taxpayer, and that is to approve the request to make the cuts in the amount of $1,421,019 from the proposed budget that was submitted to the town council in January. It would be a real win for the school system if that's as far as we had to go. But I must say that we spent an awful lot of time trying to get to this point, and the rest is just very drastic and will ultimately affect all of our students and our community for a long time to come. Thank you.
I'll second that motion for discussion.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table and a second. What we will do now is we will start having the discussion. I'll continue to go in the order of the hands that I saw up. Before we would take any vote on this motion, we would have citizens' comments and let people speak. So the next hand I saw was Mr. Cerisi, and then, as I said, we'll jump over to the other side of the table with Mr. Bowerly, and we'll go down this way. Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to take a quick moment to recognize and compliment the superintendent and his staff on the work that they've put into preparing this budget. And I also want to compliment the superintendent on his openness to the committee, the staff, and the community, and making himself available. I've seen numerous emails go back and forth with the superintendent offering to make himself available on nights, on weekends, whenever may need be for community members, staff members, and committee members as well. So although it's not certainly not news that he wants to communicate and not good news to communicate, he has certainly done an excellent job in being transparent during this process and making himself available for questions, comments, concerns. So I just wanted to recognize him for that work. He's a long-standing resident of this community as well and has children in the school district, so he certainly has a professional and personal vested interest. I seconded Mr. Welch's motion, and I will caution, I think this 4% local tax support with requirement to cut $1.4 million is a best-case scenario. And I think, unfortunately, I think realistically, we will be getting into that second yellow area before this was over, and possibly that red area as well. So this is a starting point. I think there's still much more discussion to be had, much more work to be done, and again, I would caution people in the audience and people on the committee to think that if this passes, then that's it, and the other things that were outlined by the superintendent are safe, because that's a far cry from reality, as much as some would like it to be. I don't necessarily have any questions for the superintendent regarding that first green section. We've been over this at several past meetings, and I think our work has just begun. I'm thankful that we've had a turnout from people in the community tonight, and I would hope that people continue to through this budget process, because it will be ongoing for the next month or two. As well as the superintendent mentioned, contacting your council members, because ultimately the funding does become allocated from the town council. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
I have two quick points to make, and one is one that I think the students especially need to hear, and that is that I've seen this committee talk about these cuts for a while. On the newspaper, we've written an article about it. I know that this process is very, very difficult, and there's nothing easy about it. And as Dr. Auger mentioned, we wish we could keep all these things, but in reality, we can't. And I would just like the students to remember that even when, and I'm not speaking just to the students who are here, for those who are here, and I'd like to commend the ones who are here for coming and showing their support, but the students need to keep in mind that we can't keep everything, and that some things need to go in order for the school to keep up the level of excellence that we expect from it. And the second thing is a personal note. On the in this green section, we are proposing cuts to a library clerk and a librarian, and I personally, my advisory is in the library. And not just for me, but I've seen for so many students, the staff in the library is an invaluable resource, especially to students who are struggling with things like senior paper, where they need help getting research, getting information, getting citations, getting them correct so that they pass their yes test, or even just people who need help studying, who need help doing a book report, doing anything, getting on the computer, finding sources for a bibliography they have due, an annotated bibliography. The library staff is invaluable for that, and I would really hesitate to take that away from the students, to take away that resource that they often use. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mrs. Benson.
Thank you, Madam President. I was writing down points as Dr. Auger was speaking, and the gentleman here from the school gave all of us a good point. But I noticed, and I kept waiting to hear, that nothing was coming out of administration. So with the many cuts that we have, and you listed, I hate to think about diesel fuel. I was reading this morning that we all can expect diesel is always higher than regular, and that gas, we all as citizens know what we are going up against. But what we would like to see is the cuts being spread. Now, with the number, may I
clarify, there are two cuts there that are administrative-based. One has to do with the buildings and grounds, and one has to do with the athletic director.
They are administrative based, but with the other cuts, I'm talking about within the administrative building, the secretaries and all of those things. We have to pass this around. Now, my first question, before I can ask you any more, when you speak about the 4%, are you aware that state law only let the towns go to 4%, so you want us to get all of the 4% rather?
No, if the town gets a 4% increase overall, they would increase our budget by 4%, and they would increase all of the budget revenue that they receive by 4% as well.
Okay, and the next one is, that's very important, early retirement. How are we situated on that, Mr. Draper? That I was under the impression that when we offered the incentives for early retirement, and if you go back and look in the record, I think several times I asked our former superintendent, where are we going to get all this money to pay for these early retirements? We were going mad pushing them out the door. So what is it that we have related to early retirement, Mr. Draper, besides the health insurance?
That is the expense you have. School committee took action in 2010
Yes, I was here.
to set aside fund balance to pay for early retirement incentive in the form of health care.
Okay, so that shouldn't have been mentioned tonight. You said that was set aside in 2010.
Correct, but it needed to be mentioned this evening because the BEP examination, those auditors recommended we provide that information in the budget.
Yes.
That's why it was added.
Okay, thank you.
May I follow up on that, please?
Well, you'll have your
A quick
time.
question.
Let Mrs. Benson have her time, and then you'll have yours,
I'd like
Mr.
to
Mudge.
follow up, could I follow up on that?
Let Mrs. Benson have
I
her
would
time. She
defer
has the floor right
to
now.
what the chairman is saying.
Well, we'd like to
Go
keep like to keep the continuity.
You'll have your time next, Mr. Mudge, and so
Thank
let
you, Madam
Mrs.
Chairman.
Mrs. Benson.
Okay, so the next thing is, I said to the gentleman here, I don't know why we're going to open the doors. And I didn't see any percentage for administrators or anything. We lead by example. That's the way we do. And I would hate to be going to high school now. I know what you're going through. We're going through the same thing. And if you want to see a comedy, all of you, go to town hall and take a seat the last 2 days when people are paying their tax bills. So everybody knows what we're going through. And about the special ed children, would federal law allow us to cut back on special ed, Dr. O'J?
The cut that I've listed in the red section would be to continue services. It would be a greater burden on case managers at the high school.
So when you speak about bringing back, if we have a kid at Meeting Street School, and some of those, maybe with perspective, that their main job is, and they have the equipment to deal with those things, do you foresee any other expense like we had to put in the playground?
No.
Or bringing a...
No, the materials that we would need to do this transitional work, if we were to do it at the available space at Davisville Elementary, we have that equipment, and we even any other materials that we may need, we would still save $100,000 for the district. These are not little kids that use playgrounds. These are young adults.
When you speak of
They're 18
special
and
ed,
19.
I'm thinking in turn from 1 to 12.
Yeah, that's not
From 1
included
to
in this
12,
cut.
from
That's-
first
that's
K
not-
through 12.
Yeah. There's a cut in special ed staff, .8 position, at the high school included in this, and there's also in the green section for the 4%, there is something related to transitional services. That's, you mentioned bringing kids from perspectives. That's what that would do. Right now, we spend a lot of money outsourcing these students to an outside organization. We would do that with our own staff.
And these kids would still be getting what's mandated,
Absolutely.
and they'd be getting the same quality of service.
Absolutely.
The next questions is related to what you were saying about using teachers.
Yes.
And as you know, some of the things that you mentioned, you would have to be cross-certified.
I'm not sure.
Are we
what
going to
you're-
be writing the Department of Education asking to,
You mean as an athletic director?
no, I'm talking about, you mentioned other teachers using them.
Using them for what? I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Let me see.
Are you referring to number 19, Mrs. Benson?
Yeah, where you say you'd have 3 teachers involved. Is that 19? I was taking notes.
I'm making a guess. That I'm trying to figure out what your reference is to. So I'm not sure.
To transfer to elementary school teachers to reading and math support.
Yes, it's right here.
Yeah, she means number 19.
Number 19.
Number 19 would be that I wouldn't have any less staff members or any fewer staff members. I would have an area where I could see 2 elementary classrooms that because of enrollment, I would not need as much, and therefore I could pull those 2 and convert basically to one job of reading and math support, which could be one of those elementary teachers doing that work, and one would end up being a social worker. It wouldn't be the same person, but it would be equivalent money in terms of another person with a job.
Okay, there's the possibility that you would be cross-certified and could be a reading teacher and have math certification.
That is a possibility, and as I said
What
before,
about the
this may be
social worker?
half and half reading and math, or it may be based on the needs that we have. We may say, well, you know, and one thing that I know for certain, I mean, we have a number of reading specialists at our elementary level. They do a great job, but, you know, we're getting better at servicing students who really are behind in their reading. And one of the things that we're noticing as we get better organized around this work is that we can't give all of the kids all of the time that they need. So we need more staff to help with that. So this would be an area where we could do a transfer and find a person to give that kind of support. And that may turn out to be a reading specialist, or it may turn out to be a math specialist, a complete 1.0 of either one, or it might be a combination of those 2 things.
Okay, I do hope we have that many, because the certification within the state has changed. You know, you get 1 through 3, elementary and kindergarten, then you go from 3 to 6, then you have to have a junior high. So I'm glad to know that we have all of those teachers that can be switched around and gone on. Now, number 21, removal of National School Board Association participation. For those of you who get the magazine, it is one of the most helpful professional tools that we have. A lot of the things that come up in school committee, if you read it, that come up, I'll give you for an example, when we wanted to go to a different type of transportation. And I'll give you an example of the magazine for December and January. The articles are related to the new lunch program, the way that things are creeping into the school system about outsourcing lunches. It gave a particular state where the FBI is investigating it. So the National School Board magazine is very important. So my question to you, Dr. O.J., could we have one membership and we come into your office and check it out to read it? Not each one, because it is a very expensive thing.
I suppose that is an option we could explore.
Okay.
I haven't really thought about that, but there are other, publications and things that we receive in the district that are things that I could do. I could get to school committee members as well.
Okay, because it is very expensive for each individual prescription. And we could maybe have a library there, because we need to be constantly reading and learning. So, this is a hard pill, and I'm not going to say I wished I had your job, because I got enough trying to decide what we're going to do with this. That's the thing about it. Too many people try to do your job. And, but we have to have education. And we can't constantly have this blame game. Because whether it comes from left or right, it all comes out of our pockets. Now, I didn't hear you mention, and this is the last question, about the increase that the governor mentioned that we're going to get, and the increase that's coming from the federal. I don't see this grim of a picture of all of these things and all of these cuts in the school. I just don't see them. Not at this stage. Because we had windfalls of stimulus money. And who knows? Let's have hope. Because this is just killing school. And some places, nothing was mentioned. And many of them, everything is centered on the student. Everything is on the student. And until something else, I will stop at that.
Mr. Cerisi, you had a quick, something you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, just one quick second. I just wanted to make a point of clarification to a comment that was made earlier, and I really don't want to...
Is that for me, Mr. Cerisi? Please give it to
Mr.
me so
Cerisi
I'll
has
be
the
able
floor,
to...
please. If you could let
so
Mr.
I'll be able to go back and put it on the
Cerisi
question.
have the floor, please? Go ahead, Mr. Cerisi.
Please, don't start that show tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not a personal comment directed towards anyone. It's just a point of clarification on some factual numbers. I really don't want to see us going down the path of pitting one area against another in these budgetary cuts, because that's not going to help us get any work done. I'd just like to point out that in 2007, one of the first years we had to start making these reductions, we had 37 FTEs for administrative staff. We now have 32.5 or 33.5. I think in my first year or two on the committee, we either cut or internally consolidated several of those positions. That was an overall savings to the district of $750,000, and that's not a one-time savings. That's a year-over-year savings. Those positions were eliminated and did not come back. So if you want to classify it as low-hanging fruit on the tree to pick, administration and so on and so forth, we've been down that road 5 years ago, and that's not to say that we should never revisit it. We should continually revisit it and look for efficiencies and internal consolidations in that area. But I do want to be fair and say that that was one of the first areas that we addressed way back 5 years ago. And again, it's not a personal comment towards anyone. I just want to be factually clear on the record as far as those budget numbers that are reflected in our budget for FTEs in the administration area. Thank you.
Thank
Maybe
you.
I'd better
Thank you, Mr.
clarify
Cerisi, for that
myself.
clarification.
May
I will
clarify?
remember that when Mr. Cerisi and I came on the committee, there was a principal here at the high school and 4 assistant principals, and now there's still a principal at the high school and 2 assistant principals. There were 7 elementary principals, and now there's 5 elementary principals. And we could go through and talk about the directors that are no longer here that we didn't replace, but I think that when you said the FTEs, that does clarify a lot of the administrators that we have cut over the past years. Okay, Mr. Mudge, it is now your turn.
Borrow a minute, please.
No,
Will
no,
you
Mrs.
yield
Benton, we'll come
Go
back,
ahead,
but
go ahead,
Mr. Mudge, it's your turn.
That you give
Yeah,
me.
go ahead. I'm looking at something. Let her just finish up.
I have one more question, Ms. Page.
Yes.
And the question that I have, I think you were, the committee members were completely not focusing when I said administration. We can't do without principals. I was speaking, and I thought I said the administrative building, the one right across the lot. Madam Secretary, did you get administration or administrative?
Administrative.
That's what I was talking about. So please don't be misguided and have the public thinking, because we need all we can get to work with the children. And my question was, everywhere, and I will point, with the exception of the administrative building, there were no cuts. And if it's this many cuts in the field, you don't need as many wagons to pull it. That's it.
Mr. Mudge. Oh, yes, Dr. Jay.
Very quickly, sorry, Mr. Mudge, I just want to point out that that's just not true, that the buildings and ground supervisor works in the administrative building. Right now, that job is being done by Mr. Draper, who is the world's busiest man already, and he works in the administrative building. So there are cuts to the administrative building.
And Mr. Draper
Mr. Mudge.
precipitated that cut. He said he could do the job.
Mr. Mudge, you have the floor.
Thank you.
If I've ever seen
I can't vote for any reduction at this point in time, and I know we're going to have to face one. It's probably going to have to be greater, but I simply don't have enough information to go forward with this thing, especially in light of the fact that the chart changed a little bit from what my data had. But the second tier of cuts really, greatly go into athletics and other areas in here. So, in thinking about this, we're talking about a cut of $1.4 million. But actually, as I look at this is a budget increase of $509,000, a budget increase of $509,000. And what I had hoped was, when we spoke, when Dr. O'Shea and I spoke, was what we could do is assess what our current costs are in fiscal year 12 and assume, and I know what assume means both ways, is that I would like to have known what our current program as it is run today, assuming all things are the same. What would the current program cost be for next year? And why do I ask that question? We have union raises, I think Medicaid goes up, or Medicare goes up, and all these other things go up, which we have no control over, basically. And I'm not sure I get that differential, because when I look at what we need this year, I like to compare it to last year and then basically do a zero-based budgeting analysis to see, what things could be reduced. So, that hasn't happened. But also, most importantly is, I found us out, unfortunately, I had my wallet either lost or stolen. Nonetheless, when I didn't have a credit card, I went to the grocery store, and of course, I had a list from my wife, And usually you just put it on a credit card, and you don't care about what the prices are, and you pick up a little extra here and there. But when you go with cash, it's a different thing. You go with $10, you're not going to get $12 worth of product. So when you go in there, you got to know exactly what your revenue is in your pocket and what you're working with. And to that end, I've looked at this. My numbers are a little bit different than yours because yours changed, but it's only like $5,000 off. But nonetheless, what you have assumed is your revenue is going to be $58,601,000, and it just went up, I think, $5,000. But I'll just talk about my numbers right now. As I say, it's insignificant. Now, if we get $1.7 million, a 4% increase from the town, in fact, and we get an increase in state aid of $448,000, that's almost $2 million, $2.1 million. Our net increase of revenue is only $500,000. Now, how does that happen? They say, if we get an increase at 4% of $1.7 million, and we get an increase in $448,000 because of our increase in state aid, we only have a net increase from last year's $58,092,000 budget. That's the difference between the $58,600,000 and the $58,092 that was the appropriated budget last year. So what's the issue? The issue is significant because this budget, before we make all these decisions and everything else, does not consider the use of any reserve funds. And I'm not sure, and it was one of the questions I had tonight, is I'd like to get an accounting of exactly what the status is on our school fund balance as of today, because not a penny of fund balance has been allocated towards this budget. Secondly, we're experiencing a loss in this budget of $380,000 from Jamestown. $380,000. And that's really here at the high school. Okay? We're experiencing that. Medicaid revenue's going down by $125,000, but I don't see that as a major problem because the way Medicaid is funded, it's a one-for-one basically. It's about 50%, 51%. So if we had $1 million worth of expenditures for the year, we would get $500,000 back, and the federal government through the state picks up $500,000. So while our revenue stream that is shown in our budget today shows a decrease of $175,000, there should have been a concomitant decrease in our expenditures, the same amount. So where am I driving? While we have put, filled a grocery list, we've got to look at our revenues, and we haven't addressed that. We haven't addressed any revenues whatsoever. For example, provided and I sure hope we will, have football, baseball, and basketball teams, and we rent this facility out, I believe we ought to restore the $75,000 a year that was in this budget up until last year for eternity. That any rentals for the use of this auditorium, our facilities, or gate receipts get restored back to the general fund. That's where they belong. They've been put in an enterprise account, which is illegal as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't hold the test of an enterprise fund because everything that supports that is funded by our community through our budget. And there's no separate quid pro quo, if you may. Additionally, this school committee last February entered into a contract with Jamestown. We went to court because we had a $713,000 or $12,000 or $1.2 million, depending on the way you look at it, of a deficiency in the fiscal year 12 budget. Now, I'm not sure how we're going to reconcile that, but from what I understand, we're down to $300,000 as a deficit. So we got the money in, the $900,000 I'd like to see at some point in time. Nonetheless, what it tells me, if you go back and look at the contract we signed with Jamestown, and we have a $400,000 deficit this year, and we have a reduction of 14 or so students, that means effectively we lost $140,000 because of the loss of students. And we all would understand that because they're paying about $10,000, roughly. Well, what explains the other roughly $250,000 of reductions? It's because we gave away the house. Jamestown's got to pay the fair share, folks. It's $250,000. Jamestown, this year, and I'm bringing it up again, okay, is not being charged adequately, and I'm recommending that we seek $350,000 from Jamestown to offer this to supplement our budget. And why? Specifically, the Jamestown contract is based on 2-year-old cost data. So if we're paying a teacher $100 a year 2 years ago and $500 this year, we're not getting reimbursed for that. Okay? We're not charging Jamestown 1 nickel to use this building, and we have the audacity to charge our own people in town to rent these facilities, and yet Jamestown doesn't pay 1 penny towards the bond debt here, which should be in the neighborhood of $260,000. We have to get serious. Okay? We've got to look at our revenue stream. IT. We have an opportunity, and this school committee hasn't taken it upon itself to put it on the agenda despite my request, of saving probably at least $100,000 by consolidating our IT with the town. We need to do that. We have a couple $100,000 in school capital reserve funding. That school capital reserve funding can be used for our budget this year. There are no strings attached to that money. We can supplement it and put it back into the maintenance. That's money that exists, not new money, but it will exist by the start of the fiscal year. So there's $250,000. School fund balance. What do we have? Mr. Draper, could you tell me what the school fund balance is today, roughly?
I believe it's roughly $575,000.
So why aren't we putting that $575,000 towards this budget?
Because we're currently in a deficit reduction plan.
What's the well? That's very important because that has certainly an effect on this budget. When you say a deficit reduction plan, you're talking about a deficit reduction plan for fiscal year 12. So again, what are we saying? We have to use all of that fund surplus to fund our deficit reduction, our deficit this year?
Well, for instance, in the last financial report, I believe we declared roughly $600,000, a little over $600,000 as a possible deficit. If we had $575,000 in the bank, so to speak, that means we still have some ground to make up.
But provided the school committee approves the use of that and not the reduction of other things that could possibly offset the deficit.
But I guess the point I'm trying to make is until we know better this year how much of that fund balance we're going to need to get through the year, it would be premature for us to establish it for next year's use.
Well, yeah, but so okay, we can't debate this too much, but it seems to me, I don't know what the judge said or did, but we're not going to be allowed to overspend our budget. And from what I understand, indeed, the town council has cut our budget by $266,000. So I'm not sure. Is that going to eat into our deficit reduction plan?
Those are all determinations that will need to be made by the court and by the Auditor General. We don't have any information back on either.
Okay. So what we did is we basically were saying, instead of cutting anything, what we're going to do is use up our fund balance this year to make sure we don't, we're going to overrun, but to offset the deficit this year. And that's why it's important to correlate last year's programs and expenditures with this year's. And I don't see that, and I'm uncomfortable with that, to say the least. But I would say in the end, anyway, we're going to probably wind up with at least $300,000. Another issue, and I haven't seen it, and I don't know what our legislators are doing, but I sincerely believe that we should get our legislators to put which we requested several months ago, a bill in to relieve North Kingstown from the obligation to have to pay for children who are going to charter schools, simply because we are a performing district. That would save us $600,000. $600,000. So roughly, I've talked about $1.5 million of potential revenues. And until we can get this revenue stream squared away, I'm not prepared to go to the council with anything. I think we have to do our homework and we have to look at these things. And there are many other issues that we have to look at. The budget that I look at here today isn't sufficient in terms, and I know what the changes are here, but I can't relate to these changes to the programs of this community or the functions. For example, when I go through this, and there's been some changes, and I'll have to do the calculations over, but based on the original $60 million budget, there was going to be an increase in instruction for teachers by $839,000. I'm sure that's affected, and I'll have to rework the numbers. Paraprofessionals, we're going to lose $768,000. Pupil use software.
Mr. Medj, do you have any other questions for the superintendent?
No, I'm just making my point about the budget here, okay, is that
Could you wrap it up, because we do have other people and we have the audience who would like to speak?
Ma'am, I haven't even near, okay?
Well, I'm going to give you 3 more minutes, and then I'm going to move on.
3 more minutes. Well, what, shall I go out and speak out there as a citizen?
For 3
People
minutes.
need to know the facts, what we have here. And this committee, before we vote on anything, needs to examine these things. Where are we cutting? Are we cutting math programs? Are we cutting general ed programs? Are we cutting gym sports? If you go back and look at the next set of cuts, $800,000 of cuts, they're wiping out all sports in towns. Well, what other programs are being cut? I don't know what the programs are. Does anybody else? So we need to regurgitate this budget, if you may, and address each of these issues. From a program standpoint, I want to know what programs are being cut. For example, we talk about, well, we're going to eliminate a teacher for the library. Library. Well, how much are we spending on our librarians? What are we reducing the library functions and the cuts down to? I want to know that. Okay? For example, we're talking about the senior project. We talked about cutting $88,000 from the senior project fund. Well, in fact, the senior project fund is funded at $188,000. So we're not wiping out the whole thing. We see, regarding the senior project fund, we have another $413,000 of technology money. Okay? Is there an opportunity to save money there? Programmatically, we need to look at these things and put them together. And we haven't done that. And I would think that the council would ask us to do those things. And I haven't made my mind up on anything. But I know I haven't got enough information to make a clear, concise determination of where we're going on this. And I would be remiss in saying that I do. So we need to do a lot of work, a lot of additional work, especially if we're going to go before the council. And realistically, like Mr. Cerisi said, we ought to look at this thing and hope and at least get down to the next $886,000 of cuts. However, we don't have to do that until we can establish our revenue flow. And we got to get serious about that and take actions now to implement these things. Thank you.
Dr. Ajay, was there anything that you wanted to respond?
I don't want to get into a back and forth. A number of the items Mr. Mudge brought up have been brought up for months and years now, and I think people know how I feel about a number of them. I just want to extend to Mr. Mudge what I've already extended, that my door is open, and he can come and talk to me about details of these kinds of things as needed. I think I've been pretty straightforward about what they mean in my comments tonight and in my letters to the community and to you, and my door is always open.
We've talked about all of these things, we just disagree.
And
Dr.
right.
Jay has the floor.
So we have talked about them for many months since I've been superintendent. You've come to my office quite often, not a lot lately. If you're interested in these particular items, I'd be happy to share them with you, go over UCOA numbers, whatever you need. But to say that you don't have enough information, I think you have enough information. You've known about a number of these things for years, and you've talked about a number of these things for years. So I think you're pretty well informed about what these things mean.
Well,
and that's all I'm going to say. I don't want to have a back and forth. I just want to say that, and if we could please move on.
Could I just ask one question?
No, I'm going to move on to
How much are we
Mr.
spending
Buscarden.
on
I'm going to
face-to-face
give the floor
instruction for our kids?
to Mr. Buscarden. Thank you, Mr. Mudge. Your time has been well used. Mr. Buscarden, do you have anything that you would like to say?
Yes, nothing near as extensive as anyone else. I was just looking over the color coding and all the cuts that were suggested, and Dr. Ajay, if I may, and please don't take this as me picking at your budget, because I'm really not. I just have a question and maybe a suggestion.
No problem.
Number 42, on the back side, under the red, it addresses clerical and custodial overtime. And I'm wondering if maybe we could roll that up into the green area and possibly take $65,000 or $70,000 worth of those cuts and put them in the red. Because I think, from my experience, is when companies have difficulty meeting budget, one of the first things they do is reduce or eliminate overtime. And I would suggest that maybe we could save a librarian or a library clerk if we were able to make that switch.
I'm going to ask Mr. Draper to address some of the details about what that would mean.
Yeah, one of the things we've been doing, a couple of years ago, we reduced our rovers on the custodial staff. So what we've operationally been doing is filling in with either overtime, substitutes, or other ways to make it work. If we went to this degree of cut with our overtime, we basically have to fund snow removal. But when it comes to things like somebody calls out sick or there's some kind of coverage in a school, we have a standing practice of if it's less than 3 days' time, we expect the school to cover it on its own. What we're saying here is if somebody's out, particularly in those 3 days, we would have to cancel events. And that would have a significant operational impact on evening events at the elementary schools and the middle schools. Right now, we accommodate that. That's why this would go in the drastic category, because it would have a significant impact on what goes on.
And it doesn't work well anywhere, but it can only really work in the red area because the red area already includes a drastic reduction in those nighttime activities as it is. So there would be less of a need for the overtime from clerical and custodial staff at that point.
Well, I understand the logic. I disagree, however. I think it's more important that kids have the library available to complete their tasks, get direction, learn how to do an annotated bibliography the right way, and basically meet all their education requirements in the event that a evening event may or may not get postponed because somebody is ill. Thank you.
Mr. Cerisi and then Mrs. Avanzato.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one real quick comment to expand on what Mr. Buscarden just outlined. I agree with him, and I just want to reiterate what I said during the onset of our discussion. For me, the vote on the green section is a starting point. And I agree, there are certainly areas in the yellow and red section that I would substitute for areas in the green section and vice versa. There are also other areas where that we haven't touched on tonight, where I would suggest that we look to make some reductions instead of the areas listed here. I think that as a minimum baseline, we need a starting point, and that's why I want to at least get through the green area this evening, and that's not saying we cannot make amendments in future meetings and future discussions and reinstate things that may have been cut in the green area and fill that in with things from other areas. And I think, going back to some of the comments that were made earlier, there's certain things we can do to offset, change revenue, so on and so forth, but folks, I mean, be realistic here. We're discussing $1.4 million in cuts tonight. And again, the reality is that's best-case scenario. There's no doubt in my mind we will be back at this table cutting at least another $1 million on top of that $1.4 million. So let's just be mindful of that when we're talking about nickel and diamond and other areas, and if we do this and do that. But I certainly agree and support Mr. Biscardin's idea, and that's a direction that I want to move into once we get through this first section of the budget.
Dr. Ajay.
Yeah, I also want to just say, I certainly understand what Mr. Biscardin is talking about. The service to our students from our teachers is a priority for me. And I also want to point out something in relation to what Mr. Cerisi just pointed out. Just in the last 2 weeks, since the last meeting that we've presented this information, a number of things have come to light in my office. For instance, the most notable is the fact that the governor put out what he sees as a projection. Now, that this may or may not come true, but this is something that we plug in at this point every year. And that just shifted this whole conversation by $138,000. There are a number of things that we realize. It's what I'm trying to point out is a very fluid kind of process. Things change on a daily basis. We talk about a budget deficit and where does it stand today. Where it stands today could be at a certain number, and tomorrow morning I could find out that we have a new special ed kid with lots of needs and has to go to an outsourced placement, and all of a sudden that number just changed by about $75,000. Or we have a snowstorm next week, and there's all kinds of resources and supplies needed to handle that, and all of a sudden the savings that we've just seen, evaporate. Or we have another couple of weeks of really great weather, and all of a sudden we're realizing savings in heat. So it changes all the time. And I think this conversation is going to continue to change as we go through the spring. Not that we're suddenly going to find a couple of $1 million, but I think there'll be hundreds of thousands of dollars that are kind of in fluctuation as we go along, and we can, I think there's a lot of room to make modifications kind of as we go. I think the bottom line commitment is to get to that $1.4 million. What is contained within that may change several times over the course of this spring and even into the summer and fall by this committee.
All right, Mr. Budge, I see your hand, but I'm going to call some people who haven't spoken. Actually, Mr. Welch, I said Mrs. Avanzado was next, but you're in the line, so I'm sorry that didn't mean to purposely skip over you.
Yes, you did.
You can go.
Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. In terms of what Mr. Cerisi just said, I think, what I hear him saying and what I hear Dr. Auger saying is that this is a process that is going to be ongoing, and that, 4%, we may find ourselves going lower than that, and maybe we should be making more cuts than that at some point. We'll just have to, I think what he said about moving forward with the proposal as it is, and then we can come back and look at it. I agree very much with what Mr. Biscardin said. I have some reservations about the library cuts, and I'm hoping that we can do something to substitute somewhere along the way, because I think that's an important one. Just a couple of scattered thoughts. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Auger and the staff for putting together the information. I think we've had a lot of information put in front of us, and we've discussed this over the past couple of meetings. So I want to thank them for that comprehensive look at all of this. A few things. In terms of the charter schools and the request for relief, we've done that a couple of times from this table. We've asked for that relief from the state. We've never received a reply, and I'm sure the reply is no if we received one. A lot of the position that we're in is due to what's going on at the state, which I'm really troubled by. They increase their budget every year, just like 5-6%, without even blinking, and then the cities and towns are left to hold the bag, basically. And that's the situation that we're in now. In terms of our surplus, Ned, you said that it's like 375, am I right on that?
575.
575. Okay, well, whether we use that surplus to plug the deficit that we're looking at, or whether we use it now in this budget, that money is going to be used very quickly, and it's going to be dropped into what is a deeper hole than what we have. So I think we all agree on that. I think a lot of these questions, we have to ask for the superintendent's expertise on these, in my opinion, and defer mostly to what he suggests, because I don't have the expertise to insert my own opinion on a lot of these issues. And that's why I look to him to find out what his recommendation is on a lot of this.
Just one of your points. One of the points you just brought up about the fund balance, that it certainly seems like an easy place to go to find $500,000. But I just want to remind everybody, I think most people understand this, it is recommended by most folks, including the town manager, to us that we would keep about $1.2 million. That's about 2% of our entire budget for an organization such as a school district in a reserve. And that is to cover for, those unexpected things. We've had a number of this past year, we dipped into that fund for over $300,000 with unexpected costs for teachers and paraprofessionals that, we felt we needed in September because of unexpected differences in enrollment at certain levels. And if you don't have anything in that fund, then other things need to be cut. Or now it becomes a process where you're working again with the town council to give more of an appropriation. And as we can all see from this year's process, that is not an easy request to be made. So that's why, I just want people to know that it's not like we can just grab that money. There's a strategy to keeping some funds there.
Understand that, yeah. Those of you who have been attending meetings for the last few years will realize that this committee over the last 3 years that I've been on here has made extraordinary progress in streamlining. We've gone from what were 5% and 6% increases every year in this town on the school side alone to being level funded for 2-3 years. And that has necessitated a lot of cutting, which we have done. We've streamlined. We've held our people to 0 increases repeatedly. But we haven't looked at this kind of transformative change that we're looking at this year, if we are indeed held again to 0, which I certainly hope the council will consider not doing so, since they've done that the last few years. Nobody likes really anything on the lists, but it's just a matter of doing the job that we have been elected to do and that we have to do. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Welch?
Yes, just a couple of quick comments for the public to understand. The motion that I made and the budget cut proposal that Dr. O'Shea made was to reduce the proposed budget to the maximum that we can raise, or I should say that the town can raise the tax budget of 4%, and that's a state law. So we would get to the 4%. And as Mrs. Advisano just said, in the last 3 years, we've got two zeros and one slightly less than 1% increase in our budget. If we go to level funding, besides this $1.4 million, we have to find another $509,000 to get to level funding. So this is only the first step in trying to get there. We just continually get hit with mandates that are unfunded that we have no control over. One of the recent ones I just heard that was proposed at the State House is all-day K. And, there's just no way that we, in almost any other community in the state, in this budget situation, can afford all-day K. But yet, the legislature sees fit to make these proposals, I guess, to make their constituents happy, but we just can't afford these things. The early retirement program that we initiated a couple of years ago, that Mr. Cerisi brought to our attention, in the first year alone saved this district $507,000 on 14 positions, which was approximately $37,000 per position saved. And every year after that, there's an additional savings because we replaced 15-year employees with first and second step employees. So not until they got to the same 10th step did they earn the same money of the person that they replaced. So it's a process where we save money for that 8 or 9 years until they get to that 10th step. Yes, we need to fund because of I guess our general accounting principles, Ned.
Yes.
We need to show that we're carrying the health insurance premium. But, the overall savings to the district just goes on and on and on for a long time. So it's something that we definitely have to look at. But this is the start, and this gets us to the 4% maximum that the town can raise the taxes to give us our 4% increase in our budget. What makes up the cake in the final analysis, whatever ingredients ends up being to get to that point, is going to be subject to review from now until May. Thank you.
I'm going to speak, Mr. Mudge. I agree with what has been said here. I am also concerned about the cuts in the library, and I think that we've all said, or not all, but many of us have said here at that table, and we've all received some email this afternoon with some suggestions of other places. And I think Mr. Cerisi's right. I mean, we've been on the committee along with Mrs. Benson long enough that we know this is not a one-night process, that we come back again and again and have to continue to make these discussions as we figure out what is the town going to actually give us for our budget. So I think tonight's a start. I think we will be back here in April. We're usually back here in May and June finalizing the cuts. So I don't know what things will look like then because I don't know what we will receive, but this will be a process. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to go to citizens' comments.
Excuse me, could I
Yes,
finish
Mr. Mudge?
mine? I think you kind of left me out.
No, I've gone through everybody here, and I gave you more time than anyone, Mr. Mudge.
You had Mr.
So-
Cerisi and Linda and everybody else, my hand was up, and then you said Mr. Welch's, so may I have my opportunities to have my final comments, please?
No, you've had your opportunity of your final comments, and you had longer
That's
than everybody
despicable.
else.
That's
So I'm
despicable.
going to move on to the citizens' comments now and let them speak.
You'll be ashamed of yourself.
All right, the first person who we had sign up on the list is Nancy Siccione. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name, because I should know because you've come here before and you've worked with Hamilton, so I apologize.
It's okay. Good evening to all of you. I brought along a little visual aid just to sort of help mostly the audience, because certainly I hope all of you on the committee have broken the numbers down into basic 3 areas that the proposed cuts would be affecting. So it's probably hard to read. I did this on my kitchen table when I get home after a very long day. You'll see that the best case scenario, the 4%, not that bad. Mrs. Bellevue, para of the year, could you please hold that up so the audience can get a little sense? So the categories I selected were the NKESP, which is the union that represents the custodial, the maintenance, the clerical, the paraprofessionals, the kitchen staff. I hope I didn't forget anybody because that would be really embarrassing. Yes, the buses. Then I broke it into the NEA-NK, the teachers' union, and then the administration. And Mrs. Benson, I liked your comment because you're absolutely right. The worst-case scenario, the NKESP would be hit the hardest with 0 funding or zero increase in funding, we would be hit with $1,305,988 in cuts to our union members. The teachers with zero funding would have $408,100 in cuts. And the administration, $125,306. So, you know, it's hard to swallow. I appreciate that the job is not easy. I can feel for you. But, you know, the leadership in that umbrella of administrators, and I'm not necessarily talking about the plants and grounds positions, you can lead us, but a great leadership would lead us by example. And what are you willing to give up yourselves? Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Tony Silvera, and after her is Mary Churchill De Silva.
Good evening. My name is Tony Silvera, and I live at 56 Ellis Road, but I'm also the band director here at the high school, and I've been part of the North Kingstown Music Program for over 12 years. I'd like to just point out and make a clarification about a concern I have in the yellow, where it says on number 22, reduce one full-time elementary music teacher. What that is exactly is looking at our beginning band and string program. And with the idea of moving it after school, we are very concerned about that, because what you're doing is you're taking part of our curriculum and putting it after school, which has been proven a failure around the state. And what will happen is that we start out usually with 150 students during the school day. If you move it to after school, it will be decreased probably by half. And then what will happen is those programs will move on to 6th grade, and then the band is smaller. And then when the 6th grade band is small, people aren't going to sign up in 5th grade. And we'll keep continuing until it really deletes what we have. So when you're looking at other programs here, and of course, no one wants anything cut, but if you are losing a 6th grade teacher, you still have 2 6th grade teachers continuing on the same exact program. When you take away this one elementary music teacher, you are taking away the feeding group, the beginning of the string and band program, which is the basis of everything we do. So I'm very lucky where, as the high school teacher, I get the glory of, you know, going to concerts and events and being able to tell you how many people we have in Allstate. But I can't do it without this feeder group. And even if the budget picks up in 2 to 3 years and you say we get back that teacher, the damage has been done. We might never come back. So it's not really a fair assessment to just look at it as one music teacher. You are hitting us in the curriculum, and it is the beginning of the group. And I'm asking that you consider taking this off the table as far as the teacher for beginning band and strings. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Mary Churchill De Silva, and then we have Karen Knight.
Good evening. My name is Mary Churchill De Silva, and I am a North Kingstown taxpayer. I live at 104 Butternut Drive. Primarily, I'm the mother of 3 boys, all who have come through North Kingstown schools. And my youngest is presently a senior at the high school. Secondarily, I'm a paraprofessional at Stony Lane. I'm not involved in the negotiations for the NKE ESP contract. It has been made clear to us that the school department and the school committee is faced with making hard choices as they try to assemble a balanced budget with less funds. You want us to accept the outsourcing of our custodians. We cannot do that. I've defended our custodians before and will continue to defend them here. Our custodians are invested in our schools and in the students. They take pride in the work they do. To outsource means uncertainty. We do not know who will be working in our schools. We don't know who will be taking care of our school buildings and the students within. Those of us that work in the schools every day understand the fine job that these custodians do each and every day. You suggest that by outsourcing, our custodians might be hired by the company that oversees the cleaning of our buildings, but there's no guarantee. They may be hired, they may not. If they are hired, they will probably lose their benefits and lose their seniority, of course. You are, in essence, firing the custodians if you do this. I doubt that the RFP includes all the extra work that the present custodians do each and every day. What I don't understand is the insinuations that our union is at fault for stalling negotiations. From my understanding, we are not the ones who walked away from the negotiating committee, from the negotiating table. We're not the ones who decided to drag this process out. We are willing to make concessions, but we will not lay down and agree to outsourcing. There is the claim that these decisions must be faced for financial reasons, but I'm particularly curious about this. What is the financial cost of the legal fees associated with negotiating this impasse? Who pays for that? The taxpayer?
Thank you.
I agree.
We have Karen Knight and then Tina Bilodeau.
Real idiot.
Hi, I'm Karen Knight. I live at 112.
Would you say big mouth?
Excuse me, committee, Karen Knight has the floor, so please give her our attention. Thank you. You may proceed.
My name is Karen Knight. I live at 112 Mockingbird Drive, North Kingstown. I'm a taxpayer. I also am a paraprofessional at Stony Lane Elementary School. I have one question. Why are we wasting taxpayer money on legal fees for the union when the union made more monetary concessions than you need? Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't you repeat that comment, Mr. Welsh?
We have Tina Bilodeau, and then we have Sandy Blankenship.
Hi, my name's Tina Bilodeau. I'm a paraprofessional at Hamilton Elementary School. This goes along with what Mary DeSilva had said earlier about who's going to be in our schools working with our children. The GCA service group will provide custodial services at the school. According to information that they hired a person who was charged with the rape of a 16-year-old student on the school grounds. Also, they had another person working at the school that was a sex offender. I don't want to be exposed to that. I don't want our children to be exposed to that. And my final point is why are we wasting taxpayers' money on when the union did make concessions? How much is that costing the taxpayer right there? And can we please try to find an end to this? Thank you.
Thank you. We have Sandy Blankenship and then Jay Romano.
Sandy Blankenship, 103 Dodge Street. I've been struggling this evening. I've come before you several times, as you know, over the last several meetings, if not more. I met with Dr. Auger today, and Dr. Auger, I have to say that it's evident that you're, emotionally invested in this, obviously very visibly tonight to all of us. You know that I am. You and I have had many discussions, and we can hardly even get through a conversation without one of us getting emotional about it. Right. That being said, it leaves me thinking here tonight that we need to come back together, stop spending, both of us, we need to stop spending money on legal people to bring us together again. We can do this thing. We were close. You're all all you think about is we need outsourcing on the table again. You know, we were there. We were there with concessions, rather substantial concessions, at the time that you called impasse. And I've said this over and over again, and you've heard it. You've heard it from my members tonight and my members previous to this. I am telling you, we are committed to this community. And I said it to Dr. Auger today. Let's stop this political nonsense and come back together and get this thing done. We can do this. Stop wasting time and energy. Negative energy is what we're spinning. We need positive energy going here again. We can get this thing done. Bring us back together. Stop wasting taxpayers' money, school department money, on not coming together for this contract.
I agree.
Thank you. We have Jay Romano, and then a signature, I'm not sure exactly what it is.
Good evening.
Hold on, Mr. Romano, sorry about that. Mr. Arthur Carlson has also asked to speak, so you may speak after Mr. Romano.
Justin Romano. I'm a custodian, resident, taxpayer, parent of kids that have gone through your system. You've seen me before. Please keep looking at me. Pay attention. Mr. Auger, thank you very much for putting everything on one page. The $1.4 million, you've done your homework. I applaud you for it. No problem at all. You say these are painful times and probably the most difficult job in your life. It's been the most difficult job in my life, and I'm only a custodian. The last 4 years, you've been trying to get rid of all of us. I'm not going to go the outsource route. It's not on the table right now. I went to the town council meeting, though, as you told me I should. I was told that the $9 million is in a fund that is required by charter, 10% of their $9 zillion budget. And that's where it's going to stay for a bond rating and blah-de-da-de-da. The insinuations were flying left and right about the animosity between you and them, about how funds are misappropriated at the school committee. I was quite embarrassed almost, being the last speaker there, to ask for money for the school department. But I got to the microphone and did my best for you and for us. To your list, number 7, athletic director. I know these are hard times, Mr. Cerisi. This is just statements. You're going to pass this, and I understand why. But number 7. Jim Marcella is the athletic director. You say it's a 1.0 job. I'm learning this terminology. Mr. Marcella puts in 2.0 at least. You're going to cut it down to a half a job. You're going to end up paying a lot more overtime for an athletic director to do what Jim Marcellus does. And again, it's directly related to the kids' athletics. Just keep that in mind. This man has done more on a 1.0. You got it. You're paying him 1.0, but he's giving you 2.0. Number 11. Administrative also, you called it. This is, I assume, Mr. Cahoon's job, plants and grounds. He's been gone for a while, and no matter who's working the hardest, the jobs are still getting done. We should be saving $106,000 and not $65,000. If we don't need him, God love his soul, he hasn't gone yet, but he's gone from our employment. If we don't need him for 5 or 6 months, how long he's been gone, I don't believe we need him now. We all work harder, Mr. Draper. There's no doubt about that. I've been working harder. Mr. Cerisi said they cut so many positions since 2007. Well, let me tell you, custodians get cut, maintenance gets cut. We all share the burden throughout the years. This is this year. Okay? As the figures showed to you, and I'm glad somebody wrote those up very nicely, we're getting it everywhere. We're getting it in every body hole possible. We're cutting the whole thing for you. How much was it that we're carrying? What was the number out there, the ESP people? No, it was zillions of dollars, considering the whole pie. All right. Lead by example, somebody said that, was another good line. You know, the ESP people, the custodians and everybody have always been willing to cut their W-2 forms. They have told you that time and time again. Even before outsourcing came on the table, we understand it's hard times. We understand we come to the table and make concessions and lower our income and work harder with less people. Lead by example, people. Administration. You got 2 lines on here. I don't believe it's enough. I look at you straight in the face. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. Stand up to the plate. If we got to cut our W-2 forms, we're willing to do it. Let's cut your W-2 forms. Let's get some of the fat off of there. Let's show your responsibility. We have shown ours, and we will always show yours. We have 200 people in our committee, our union as it's called. We're all there for the community of North Kingstown schools. We believe it's a great asset to have. That's why people come to North Kingstown to live. We are the least paid people, and we're taking the biggest cut if this comes down to the wire. $400,000 on the green line we're taking on concessions that will go to our negotiating committee. And as it's been said, I just can't understand it either. That number you got here, I think we've offered you more previously, and it just hasn't worked out. Another question I have is, you want 4% tax increase and 4% more revenues. I hope when you're telling us to go to the town council and get some money for you, hopefully you're negotiating with the town council to make sure it stays in the green and get the 4%. I hope you're doing that every day.
I met with Mr. Embry today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your effort. I'm not here to slam you. I'm just giving you some comments. My last comment, like everybody else's comment, from the least paid people. Why are you wasting taxpayers' money on the legal fees to settle on our union contract? Let's get together. We're all in it together. Give and take. That's all I'm asking. Settle the union contract. Let's get back to the business of taking care of the schools and making them the best they are. People come to town. People stay in town like I did. I'm here 25 years. I put 2 kids through a beautiful school department. That's what we need. That's what we'll keep on doing for you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Romano, we have Mr. Arthur Carlson, and then Brenda Enos.
I didn't expect to talk, all right, but my granddaughter came home from school today, and she was all excited. And she says, Grampy, they want to cut the sport programs, and they want to cut the music programs out of the school budget. She says, please go to the meeting tonight and say something. So here I am. I feel that sports, music, and any of the other social programs are just important to children as any other elective that the children could take. I know in the past few years, my granddaughter has been involved in a couple of the music programs at Fishing Cove and Hamilton Elementary School. Those programs that were put on by the music teacher were excellent, and the children themselves did a very fine job. If you were to remove some of these programs from your budget, some of these children will not be able to participate in school extracurricular work. Going to school sometimes is just as much important as participating in a sport or a music program as is studying to, further their future. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Brenda Enos and then Michelle Haskell.
Hi, I'm Brenda Enos. I have a son and daughter that attend North Kingstown High School, and I'm really here. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I was listening to the impassioned plea by Dr. Auger, and he said it so eloquently that it really speaks to what I've been feeling about the budget. Nobody wants to see anything cut, but the worst-case scenario is in the red, the best case is in the green, and I hope as a school committee you support him in that, and I'm a member of the Booster Club. And, of course, when they say sports, my son and my daughter get excited, oh, what are they going to cut, and especially in the arts, the music program. And I think you'll be seeing a lot more parents and a lot of children who will be speaking at the town council meeting to really stand up and voice their opinions about the cuts that possibly could be made in the future. And that's all I wanted to say, is really to support Dr. Auger, and he was working really hard to try to bring the town together and to make the least amount of cuts possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Haskell? I don't have anybody else signed up after that, but if there is somebody who would like to speak, just make sure that you're sitting down here in front and that you give us your name and address when you start speaking.
Good evening, Michelle Haskell, 25 High Bank Avenue. I come here tonight as a taxpayer, also as a parent of 3 children, and I am also the music teacher at Fishing Cove and Forest Park. So if I haven't met you before, it's nice to see you. I'll admit I'm a little nervous standing up in front of you, but I have 3 children. They're all in the district. I have 1 high school student, 1 middle school student, and 1 elementary school student, and each has benefited from the instrumental music program here in North Kingstown. I'm more here tonight for the children who are coming after them. I'm very concerned that we may pull the instrumental music program from the 5th grade. Our instrumental program really begins, from kindergarten, I would say, because the kids start playing instruments in kindergarten. They put their hands on a recorder in 4th grade for the first time, and that prepares them for 5th grade instruments. If we start cutting away at the program, it will have effects not only at the elementary level, but all the way up. So I'm very concerned there. I'm also concerned at the idea of putting it after school. Many of our children, it's a disservice to them. We will no longer be offering equal opportunities to all of our children in North Kingstown. I can tell you right now, some of the children that signed up this year will not be able to come after school. It's just not an option for them. So I believe in equal opportunities for all of our children. I believe in the instrumental program here in North Kingstown, and I hope that you'll do what you can to preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dave Marble, 8 Kristen Lane. Sorry I was late. I didn't get on the list. I'm president of the Booster Club here at the high school. Most of you all know me. 2 things. One, I want to thank Dr. Auger. We're really getting visibility through the process, and quite honestly, one of the first times I've really been able to look at it and see what's going on. It's a huge benefit. And you may have seen, you did see the letter that I recently wrote and started to put out to our members, and will circulate throughout the community, both at the middle schools and at the elementary schools as we go along. If I sit here and preach to you about how important co-curricular activities, I believe I'll be preaching to the choir, literally. And so our mobilization that we will be doing as parents is really going to be targeting the town council and really making our feelings known, because we are down here all the time. And I really do believe in this case we need to be there as well. There's a couple of terms I used in my letter that I want to make clear. My profession is actually in higher education right now, and looking at experiential learning trends around the world. The use of the term extracurricular versus co-curricular is an interesting thing that's going on in higher education, and I've been to many places that are doing away with the term extracurricular when it comes to things like arts and music programs. It's co-curricular. There are actually an advocate, the vice provost at Georgetown, is advocating the death of the core curriculum in favor of the holistic co-curricular experience of a student. Those are the trends that are going on in higher education and trying to filter down to our levels at K through 12. And we really shouldn't use sight of it. And I use that term because extracurricular means extra. You can kind of like move it over here. We got to do this. And I know the basic education plan mandates certain things, but be very clear, everybody, that the basic education plan literally, in words, says minimum adequate requirement of education. It's up to us to determine what North Kingstown's definition is of a quality education in North Kingstown. And honestly, the 0% level funded and the things you've had to put on there doesn't cut it. Flat out doesn't cut it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree.
Hi, Joy Arnold, 1016 Old Baptist Road, and I'm also one of the media specialists at the high school. First, I wanted to say thank you to Brent Bowerly for his comments at the beginning, mainly because it's just really nice to hear from a student that they recognize what we do in the media center and that it's helped you. So that was really nice to hear. Secondly, I understand what everyone has said tonight, that these are just the beginning. You're looking at the number and that you plan on going through and deciding on what you can and can't live with as far as cuts and hopefully prioritizing the list a little bit more. I know it's a difficult job. I have this year gone through the budget a lot more than I have any other year, although I have always tried to be somewhat involved. I do go to town council meetings. I was at that last one that Mr. Romano talked about, and I will be addressing them. So I would like to be an active part in this. I would like to give suggestions and to help you through the process, as well as I can't help but stand up and let you know how important my area is to me, as well as I believe it is to our students, which Brent hopefully helped us understand a little bit more tonight. So I'm going to try and step back a little bit and understand that you're going to be looking forward and just going through the budget a little bit more, and I'll be here every night and sending things to you and answering questions and trying to help through the process as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Glenna Stolzberg. I live at 25 East Norwood Circle. I'm a taxpayer, I'm a parent, and my daughter's been in the music program with North Kingstown Schools for the past 7 years or so. And coming from the Warwick school system, I have to say I really love the North Kingstown School. I really love the school system. I love the community. It's such a small community. We have so much to offer here. We have a lot of heart. And I really hate to see what goes on at some of these meetings. I don't come very often for that reason. And I just want to say I really appreciate Dr. Auger's, all of his work that's gone into this budget. I'm also an accountant. I look at these numbers and I don't understand them. And there's some really huge numbers, and you're up against a lot of constraints. And a lot of them are from our government, the mandates, all the special needs, all the special areas. Everyone wants this piece of the pie. I don't think anyone in Mr. Auger's position wants to hurt anyone, leave anyone out, or have a special area of safety where he doesn't want to touch them and he has a special need of his own. I think he's fair and honest, and I think all of the committee members have come together because they want to see a better community here in North Kingstown for our kids. I know as a parent, I love all the special curriculars that they have here. There's so many things they offer. And, you know, for someone to go through the budget and speak off of totally different numbers, bring up things from the past when we're discussing a budget where we're trying to come out to a 4% increase, a 2% increase, or a 0% increase, it would be nice if we all stayed on the same page and helped one another to understand what we're talking about today. I hate to see that there's a deficit right now because one of the unions has not finalized their contracts with the school department, and I heard it was up to about $50,000 in overages right now because the contract hasn't been renewed. And I feel very sorry for all the custodians and all the lower-level people who don't directly teach our children because they're all a part of your community, they're your neighbors. We're all part of the economy that's going through this horrible thing. And we all have to reach out and work together and help each other. And let's get this contract passed in a way that helps everyone. If we can't all agree to these cuts, then let's go line by line and do 10% cuts across every department in every area you can. Because you've got to work together. I think all of you are trying really hard, and I really commend you for your work. This is a lot of work to have to go through. And when you're an educator, to have to go through these kind of numbers and this kind of work and this kind of heartache to decide what's going to happen to your school system, I think is really going above and beyond. And it must be a very tough job, and I commend you, Dr. Auger.
Thank you. Mr. McGuinn?
Good evening. Jim McGuinn, 412 Chimney Rock. I'd like to speak as I am a taxpayer, also a parent of a daughter who went through K through 12 and is now in graduate school, and she's teaching at the university as part of her grad program. She was an AP student. I have taken the time to speak with Dr. Auger when he first was considering the job. It wasn't about budgets, and it wasn't about advanced placement students. It was about vocational education, the kids at the bottom, and making sure that they had a chance, because we do fail. We have the second highest homeless population in this town, and we do virtually nothing for vocational ed. There is some for special needs students going on right now in the cafeteria, and that would be a crime to lose that, because that's an invaluable service, and a $150,000 deficit would not cover the cost of providing that service to those children. Life service. And the other departments that are doing it, janitorial and whatnot, it's invaluable. We did have, Mr. Mudge went to the school 1,000 years ago. He can tell you about the vocational ed, but it's important. My second conversation with Dr. Auger was a couple weeks ago, and we had a conversation about the budget. And Dr. Auger says, I've heard a lot of the things Mr. Mudge says, and I just don't agree. Well, a lot of those things are important to this current deficit in this next year's budget, because for 30 years, rental of this building and gate receipts were part of the general fund. And debt service for this high school and the high school before it was paid by Jamestown to cover the bonding cost. This building was designed to include approximately 200 students from Jamestown, and that had been figured in. This is the first fiscal year in 30 that Jamestown is not paying debt service on this school. Commissioner Gist wrote and directed the town council to ask for the money, which they did, $262,000 in the current year. The town council was not supported by the school committee or the superintendent. We didn't collect $262,000. How far would that go towards music and band and athletics? The thing that's going to drive Jamestown out of this school system is not the cost, because, in fact, the cost has gone down this year. $400,000 they paid less this year to send their students to North Kingston than last year. what's going to send them away, my family, mother's family comes from Jamestown, is the loss of the athletics, the loss of the music. That's going to drive Jamestown students out. I have seen their comparisons to other schools. They've done it almost every year for the past couple of years because of the wrangling that goes on. Every year we talk about cutting music and cutting sports. That's going to drive Jamestown out. That's $2 million. Now, fill that hole. I look at these cuts, and, I've worked around the world looking at budgets. That's my expertise. Multi-million-dollar companies. Someone was an accountant, I can't make hide nor hair of this. This is the current, and there's red in here, I know you can't see it, it's an eye chart. There's a line in here, okay, of red. This is the current year-to-date budget for this school system general fund. There are 1,489 items that have a negative balance. Either nothing was allocated or we're over-allocated already. 489, totaling $8.6 million. But the bottom line of the budget shows an available balance of $5 million. If this was your checkbook, you'd be bouncing checks. And every budget is just an extension of a checkbook. I don't know how you do next year's budget. You talk about today? Anybody wants to look at this, I'll let you look at it. How do you do a budget when 1,489 items are, I mean, significantly negative? How do you allocate things? Do we know, we keep on saying cuts. Would you be surprised, based on the town audit, that we have, in fact, in this budget, even if it's level funded, will increase the funding per student in the school system? We've got a declining school population. Last year, the town council could have cut the local funding to this school district by $1.7 million. They level funded it.
Mr. McGuinn, you've had 5 minutes. Could you wrap it up, please?
I'll wrap it up.
Thank you.
It's been increased. If you look at this is the town financial audit. 2005, we had 2 more schools than we do today. The town has cut administrative people by about 25%. The school has not. You are absolutely right when you look at these cuts, Mrs. Benson. This is child-facing. These are child-facing cuts. These are not cuts to the administrative building. This school committee would not accept 2 prior reports saying that we should consolidate our back office, not child-facing, the things that children never see. People never contact with children. Consolidate with the town. We have 2 IT departments, 2 finance departments. Those are excess, and there's a lot of money there. They didn't accept that, so they wanted an expensive report done, $40,000. Mr. Welsh was on the committee.
Are you wrapping up, Mr.
Yes.
McGuinn?
They have completely ignored a report that was released in October that said to consolidate the back office and they could save hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is money for music, that's money for athletics, and that's money so we're not asking the lowest paid people in our staff to basically take and be put on the street without health care.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Lead by example. If you're going to cut at all levels.
Is there anyone else who would like to come to the microphone to speak at citizens' comment? All right, seeing no other folks, we do have a motion on the floor and seconded. Lorraine, could you read back the motion, please?
To approve the request.
Go ahead and read back the motion, and then, I'm sorry.
to approve the request to make cuts of $1,421,019 from the proposed budget that was submitted to the Town Council in January. That was made by Dick Welch and seconded by Larry Cerisi.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. We have a second. We've had committee member comments. We've had citizens' comments. Would we like to go down the table again to give committee member comments before we vote?
Let's
Mr.
take a
Cerisi.
vote.
I would, if we can keep it very brief and just go down the table one quick, a minute or two per member to address either the vote or citizens' comments, whichever the committee members may choose. I just have a couple of quick comments to make. One regarding the vote. I'm looking for, before this process is complete, obviously, there was some information that I requested at the last meeting that I haven't received, and that was salary increases for non-contractual people. So I'd just like to remind the administration I'm looking for that information and hope to have it before our next meeting. Secondly, one of the items in the green area that we're voting on, number 17, transfer transitional students from perspectives to DE in-house. Although I'm going to support that at this time, before I can support it in our final budget vote, I'm looking for more information on that. I know a subcommittee has been formed, and there's a few parents, students with special needs in the school district who are going to be part of that subcommittee. So look at that transfer of services, so I'm interested in hearing the input and feedback from that group before I can support that. And just going back to some comments that were made, I appreciate the public comments and the input. Many of them were spot on. Mr. Marble's comments and a couple of women who spoke at the end there. I just want to clarify a couple of things. I've heard the comment, lead from the top, lead by example, and that has never happened in this district previously. I think it should be known that the chart that was shown by a woman earlier, while that information is accurate and correct for this budget year, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. This budget year, we do have, we are in contract negotiations with, if you'd like to speak, come up to the microphone, by all means. This contract year, we've had negotiations with, ongoing negotiations with the support staff. Last budget year, in fairness to the NEA-NK, the teachers union, there were $1.5 million in concessions in that contract from the previous contract, their previous contract. So yeah, they were hit hard during their contract negotiations, and they did make concessions. So to stand here and say, well, you didn't hit the teachers, but you're hitting us. Maybe not this year because the teachers are in mid-contract right now, but when their contract expired and we had to negotiate their contract for that budget year, we did. Again, to look at the administration and say, well, you didn't hit the administration, but you hit us. Well, the administrative salaries have been frozen for 2 years. Some of them have been frozen for 3 years. They're all paying 20% for their health care for at least the past 3 years. Some of them are paying 25% for their health care. The new hire administrators are paying 25% for their health care. So I just want to be sure we're comparing apples to apples. We have a lot of misinformation and rhetoric that goes on, and I believe a woman who spoke earlier said it perfect, coming together, working on this together. But the misinformation and the rhetoric that goes on, we have speakers like our last gentleman who spoke, who stands in front of the town council and encourages them to, by all means, a tax increase is fine, just please don't give any increase to the schools. We have committee members who do the same thing. And then they stand here and tell you that they support you and they don't want to see this committee make any cuts to custodians or music or gym or Well, how do you stand in front of the appropriating body and how do you, Madam Chair?
All right,
Could
all right.
you admonish the crowd, please?
Yes. All right, Mr. Streese, you may continue.
Thank you. How do you stand here and tell the appropriating authority, don't give the schools another penny, but by all means, if you need to raise taxes for the municipal side, that's fine. And then come to a school committee meeting and say, hey,
He didn't say that. He didn't
Right.
say that. Point of order. The man did not say that.
Mr. Cerisi has the floor.
Hey, hey, ESP and custodians and sports, I support you. I don't want to see them make any of those cuts. I'm sorry, you can't have it both ways. You can't speak out of both sides of your mouth. I'm sorry.
Come on. Why aren't we negotiating with ESP then?
We're going
Why
down
did we
the
walk out of
table,
negotiations?
and you do not have the floor.
Talk about hypocrisy.
You do not have the floor.
Thank you for your time, Madam Chair.
Mrs. Avanzato.
Just very briefly, obviously, none of this is, again, as I said before, anything that any of us want to do up here. I want to recognize all of our employees, and we are understanding of the position that all of our employees are in. This isn't easy for anyone. To clarify a couple of quick things, when we talked about savings with the ESP contract that were offered by that group at the last meeting, I think a figure of around $400,000 was talked about. I believe that's what it was. But just to clarify that was over 3 years. And so I just want to make sure that we're working with the correct numbers. I've spoken previously on the IT consolidation issue. That report was asking us to spend $1 million, number one. We don't have the money.
Oh, was
And
it?
excuse me.
Mrs. Avanzato has the floor. Please continue.
It was not.
And the town council had a prime opportunity to consolidate with the school department at our CD building, and they said that they would. In the minutes, John Patterson of the town council said, we are moving the servers into your building. That didn't happen. Instead, they wanted to have a no-bid contract. It was a no-bid contract until this body objected to that no-bid contract. So the story is being quite distorted over the times. I think we made the right decision for a lot of reasons. Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
Just because a person speaks like they have knowledge does not necessarily mean they speak with the facts correctly. And when it comes to consolidation, the only thing that the report indicated as a savings was for one position to be cut, $72,000 annually. And personally, the individual that would get cut is an extremely knowledgeable and beneficial person to the school district. I never would support it. They wanted to spend $300,000 to replace our telephone system, which we didn't need to do and don't have the money for it. They wanted to spend over $1 million in upgrades to infrastructure. We may have to do that. But quite frankly, folks, the taxpayers can't afford that right now. So why would we vote to spend all that money to do what? The hundreds of thousands of dollars that's been said that is going to be saved annually just does not exist. We're trying to be frugal and prudent with the taxpayer dollars here. Now, I've been personally involved in it. I asked for the town council to work with the school committee to get the consolidation report done, and yes, it did cost about $40,000. It is now a guide for us to use to go forward, to do the things that we can do, get the low-hanging fruit done, and move forward as the economy improves in order to get the things recommended by the consultant done. But now we cannot afford it. So when someone says to you, we can save $300,000 a year, there's a lot of horses that have something left over after they eat hay. And that's what that is. Thank you very much.
Our motion on the floor is to approve the green
Excuse me?
items.
How about us over this side of the table?
Yes, and I am the next person in the line.
Well, okay,
So-
you left a few people out the last time.
So our motion on the table is to approve the green motion. I know that Dr. Auger has worked long and hard on this. I appreciate that. He came in here and took over in August, and has been tough getting to $1.4 million in cuts. So I plan to support him on the green cuts. I know, as I said before, there will be lots more times we'll be talking about this and things might get shifted around. But Dr. Ogier, I appreciate all the work you've done and the amount of time you've taken to make sure that the community understands where these cuts are. Mr. Buscharden.
Thank you. I would just like to follow up on a comment that was made by Mr. Romano. On number 11, the reduction of the supervisor of the fiscal plant to 0.5, if that's something that's already happened, are there any other things on this list that have already happened that you just aren't filling? Because I would like to have a delineation between people that things are actually going to get removed versus things that have already been removed but not to be replaced. Can I ask that? Is that something I could? I know there's a lot of things going on, but I would like to ask that to be that information.
The item that you brought up,
That's a good question.
the physical plant supervisor, that is, this has been something that's been going on for some time now. It actually took place over several meetings. Different proposals were made. And currently, we have in our budget for a part-time supervisor that does replace the job that Mr. Cahoon used to do as a full-time administrator. That job currently is not even filled. And you know, Mr. Romano talked about, well, we're getting things done, and I suppose we are, but it's not to our satisfaction, not by any means. And you know, when you talk about administrators taking on extra and making sacrifices, you know, not to pull anybody out here, but Mr. Draper has a very important job in this district as overseeing our district's finances. As you can see tonight, that is no easy task. Not in these fiscal times, not in any times. And his role is expanded this year because we're in a deficit. We have not filled that position. So he oversees that. And we do the best we can. But the job is not getting done appropriately. It's not getting done to our satisfaction, and we need a part-time person to oversee that. And we need Mr. Draper to do the job that he's supposed to do in this district. Districts are supposed to have financial officers who do only that. It's a big enough job already. So there's a lot of sacrifice going on in all kinds of places. It may not show up on a spreadsheet sometimes, but it's there. And your question about other areas that things are already happening.
Just to like a delineation, like that, as an example, versus things that are actually going to be cut versus things that are just not going to be filled.
Yeah, I don't know if there's really, I don't know, Mr. Draper, if you could see anything here that fits that category, but there's nothing that really comes to mind that is something that may already be kind of in place, but not only happening on next year's spreadsheet. You see
with that exception, that is a currently unfilled vacancy, but the balance of those are positions that are currently filled. Items 1 and 2 would not have any direct impact on a person who's in a current position either.
Right.
And as you know, there are a couple of places where there are transfers, so not really money savings, but they just transfer to positions where we feel there's more of a need at this moment.
And I was wondering, one other question, if and I hate to throw, request something additional based on what is going on, but is there a way that we could look at, see all overtime that has been used this year? And I would just like to get a handle on the amount of overtime that's spent, and maybe we can then, Mr. Draper, you and I can talk about one-on-one what the break-even point is on overtime versus an additional employee.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Buscharden?
No, thank you.
Mr. Mudge?
Thank you. Well, let's get the record straight, first of all, on the IT issue. The IT committee did not recommend the telephone system. Yes, the IT consultant said over a period of time you should move to the voice over IP. The IT committee did not recommend an investment of $1 million, whatever it was that people are saying, in hardware. What the IT committee recommended, and only recommended, which hasn't been addressed by this committee, is to put a plan together for the consolidation of the management of the services for the network system, which will save money. It'll be much more than $72,000. So to sit back here and say the town council and i.e., the IT committee said, you got to invest $1 million, is false and inaccurate. Okay? So that clears that issue up. Okay? And we could speak, and we could speak.
Mr. Mudge, that does not clear it up, because that's patently false.
You're absolutely wrong.
That is absolutely wrong. You yourself told us not to go with the voice over IP because...
You're right, exactly.
Because the committee hadn't finished its work yet, and you knew there was a recommendation. When they came to the town council meeting, their representative himself commended us for going with the cable-based phone system because their recommendation was based on getting phones in every classroom in the high school. We don't need that.
And
the recommendation from this committee
did not,
was for an initial investment of several $100,000.
The IT committee did not recommend.
Let Dr. Auger finish, please.
We need a lot of things in this district, Mr. Mudge, before we need several $100,000 for technology.
The IT committee did not say that.
If I get several $100,000 from the town,
finish.
I'll take care of a lot of this list before I spend a dime on new technology for phones, which I don't need.
Ken, let me tell you, the town council or the IT committee did not recommend those, period. And it's false to say that they did.
Well, it's false to say they didn't.
Okay? Then we'll get that clarified, sir.
What is your point of order?
Now, let me follow on.
What is your point of order?
My point of order is, Mr. Mudge, and to Dr. Auger.
Yes, what is your point of order?
If you give me a chance, I'll tell both of them. You are not boys.
Okay, that's not a point of order.
Wait a minute.
Okay, well, let's stop preaching.
I don't like the way that was going.
Okay.
And nobody else. You're not boys in the 5th grade.
Oh, please.
All right.
One of you.
All right, I'm going to go back. Mr. Mudge has the floor,
Yes,
and
Mr.
he may
Reese,
continue
anything
to
wrong with
speak.
it?
I've made my comment there, and we will get that clarified with the town council and the IT committee, and we'll get that clarified to see who's telling the truth or not, okay? Now, with respect to the budget, now, how can we, in which I'm going to vote against, how can we say we want to cut $1.4 million, and we haven't even looked at our revenue stream to see what we have and what we don't? That's premature. Why don't we do that? Why don't we validate what our revenue streams are? You haven't done that. I would ask, why don't we analyze what the programmatic impacts are across the board, whether it be on music or art or whatever? We haven't received that. We have a little scattering of things. I would ask, does our budget include the COPS program? I would ask why we have a negative $250,000 in our budget. Why do we have a negative $250,000 in the budget that's put before you? Those are questions that need to be resolved. We hiding money? Don't know. But nobody can explain why we have a negative $250,000 in the budget. So before we go on, don't you think we ought to really analyze our budget and get an accountant and look at the thing and look at these budgets and see where we're going? I think so. That's all I'm saying. I'm not committed to any cuts across the board or anything else. It's a tough thing to do, but we can't do it unless we have all the facts together. And we don't have our facts together. And that's unfortunate.
Mrs. Benson. Did you have anything that you wanted to say in this comment before we vote?
I would like to say one thing. I've been going down this list, and I've heard things.
Are you done, Mrs. Benson?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, say your comment, and then I'm going to call Mr. Bowerly.
When the second conversation ceases, then I will continue.
Well, then I guess you
Well,
need
I'm going to
speak.
call on Mr. Bowerly if you're not going to speak, Mrs. Benson.
I'm going to speak. You
Okay.
can call on who you want, but I'm going to speak.
You have the floor.
Okay, I have the floor. I've heard things here tonight, and Dr. O'Jay has given us some very important information. And one thing I'd like to say is we only listen to a few. Because if Mr. Draper remembers, and I applaud him for all of his jobs, that was the question I asked. And if you go back in the minutes, you'll see it. When they said that he would be taking part of the job that the plants and ground out. How can he do that job? He could do it. There was a salary offer. What happens when you don't go at things right, you'll find they'll never work out. They'll never work out. And as far as this budget, it is too many things that's taken away from the students. And to the gentleman who spoke about the new trend and what they're doing down at Georgetown, I read the same thing. Over at Harvard and Yale, they're not concerned now. Princeton, those schools are not concerned about your scope.
Mr. Bowerly, would you like to say anything before we
I'm
vote?
not finished, Mrs. Page.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were.
No, I was waiting. Could you look on the other end? I don't talk when you're speaking.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to say, Mrs.
I
Benson?
certainly do.
Then please say it.
And to the gentleman who brought that up about the arts and music, you're exactly right. That is one of the leading things in education today. And you know, we have a good school system, and we have some good leaderships in our school. But every one of us here is important to this committee. Every one of us. And as the old saying goes, it makes no difference what you think about me, but it does make a difference what I think about you. So you can do all of your things. You can be discourteous. You can show all of your Newt-Ginnish. You can do anything you want to. I'm here for one thing, two things. And the people sent me here, and that is for the education of these children and to think about the tax burden. And I'm not going to quit either. I'm not quitting. So if that gives you any consolation, I'm not quitting. Because I've been in this town, I've been a tax taker, I've been a teacher in this town. And I'm paying my tax and living in a big house by myself. And it's no point in this. And when you say your door is open, I'm afraid to walk through it. Because when the emails come out, members of the school committee telling what you discussed when you walk through it. I don't ask for no special privileges. Just give me the respect that I can give back to the constituents. That's all I ask. And no, I will not be voting for all of these cuts. Frankly, I think we should meet often. You don't get to be in the 6th grade but one time. And if you're in there twice, something's wrong with you. You don't get to go to high school but one time. We've had different things that we spent money for this year. I'd like a reporting to be given before we finalize the budget on the consultants that we hired to look at wind tunnels, the windmills. What were they paid? So we need to think about our money and think about the kids and the teachers. So I want to thank the people who are here tonight, and you were right on time. Music and art is part, integral part of education today. There was a movie on Hallmark this week featuring a group of special education kids in a school. If you can avail yourself to it, please listen and look at it. They wanted to go to NASA's space system. Everybody told them they couldn't go. They wouldn't know what they were talking about. And you know those kids mastered that. We don't have a kid in this system that can't learn. We need to give them the tools to learn with. And we can't do it with the amount of cuts, these 44 on the sheet. We cannot do it. I said to the young man here sitting next to me, you won't have no high school to walk in next year. How can you sit here if we just take care of some of these other things? And I will be expecting a report on the amount of money that was paid to consultants to see about the wind, electrical wind things. That wasn't in our budget last year. And several other things. So
Thank
I'm
you.
finished.
Thank you.
And thank you for giving me time. Being a third-class citizen, that really kind of bothered you, I'm sure.
Mr. Bowerly, do you have anything that you'd like to say?
I just have one thing I would like to say, and I may be slightly out of line in saying this, but it's something I've noticed at every meeting that I've come to, and it's something I feel I need to say because, God willing, if my two associates ever show up, I won't be here for the next couple of meetings. So this is a very important topic that we're discussing, and it's obviously one that we're all very emotional about, but the animosity at this table percolates like something I've never seen before, and it gets in the way of getting things done, and there's something wrong with that. And I'm not going to be here next year, but my classmates and friends are going to be here next year, and I don't want their fate to be decided because Mr. Mudge and Mr. Walsh can't get along for 3 hours at a school committee meeting. I'm sorry, but that's not how I want these things to be decided. So I would just ask that, in a spirit of good faith, you all put your animosity aside and allow business to take precedence over your personal feelings.
Well said, young man.
Well said.
All right, thank you.
I certainly
could
agree
we
with
take
that.
a roll call
And we
vote,
do that by
please?
addressing the facts.
No, I'm sorry, citizens' comments is over.
Linda Avanzato.
Yes.
Melvoyd Benson.
No.
Ron Biscardin.
Yes.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
William Mudge.
No, insufficient information.
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Richard Welsh.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2.
Thank you. We have one or two more things on our agenda here that I think we can get through.
Madam President,
Yes, Mrs. Benson?
if you would mind, I'd like to direct the school committee secretary to say that no, with qualifications, that we are taking too much from students.
Thank you.
Did you get that?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Cerisi, and then I'll call on you. Dr. Roger, did you have anything that you wanted to say about this year's school budget, the 2011-2012?
Brief. I'm going to pass this to Mrs. Draper for a brief comment on this.
Madam Chair.
I know we're running late.
Yes.
I just, I apologize for interrupting, but there's one of the agenda items on there I think we need to make sure we get to tonight, because I think it's very timely, and that's the appointment of a school committee member to negotiation subcommittee.
Yes, I'd also like to do C, because that's also very
Right,
timely.
to replace, I believe, Mr. Thompson. And so if I could ask, could we move down to that agenda item and then pick back up with the things that are less timely?
Okay, yes, that's fine.
I
Sorry,
appreciate
Dr.
that.
O'Shea.
I'd like to make a motion
It's
to
okay.
appoint Mr. Mudge to the negotiation subcommittee.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Cerisi, for bringing it up, because that is important. That's money we are losing every time we're out in arbitration.
I would be glad to serve on the committee, however, I would prefer, excuse me, I would prefer serving on the Budget Committee, and I'll serve on both.
Next time the budget subcommittee is on our agenda, which hopefully it'll be on our next agenda, Madam Chair, I would certainly support that as well.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Call for a vote.
The only thing I guess I would say is I don't think I will be supporting that, in that much of what the school committee has stated as a majority that they would like to go in a particular direction, Mr. Mudge has been the opposite. And so I'm not sure how much that will do very good within our negotiations if he is the complete opposite of what the majority of the school committee is. So that's my feeling. Mr. Cerisi.
Okay, let's have
May
the
I
vote.
comment?
Madam Chair, I fully agree with you on that. My concern is that Mr. Mudge has not attended any of our executive session meetings, which is when we have our discussions on updates of contract negotiations. But yet he continues to publicly criticize the contract negotiation process. In order to criticize the process, I think you would need to know what's going on in the process and be part of our executive sessions to receive the legal updates on the negotiation process. I'd like to see him involved in the negotiations, because quite frankly, you know, the character assassination of the superintendent and so on and so forth that continues with these contract negotiations, and Mr. Mudge seems to have the answers and the solutions. Well, let him be involved in the process then.
Mr. Mudge, did you want to say something?
Yeah, certainly. Look, we all have differences of opinion. There's no question about that. My concern, and the reason I will accept this, is the fact that I will certainly negotiate in good faith and understanding of the issues and ensure that the school committee is completely aware of all the issues, and we thoroughly analyze, for example, whether somebody's given us $400,000 back in concessions or 5 or 6, and make sure the facts are on the table. Now, whether I agree with that or not, I will certainly make sure that we do know what the facts are, and when we come back to the committee, that there'll be no question about that.
All right, if there's no further discussion, let's go ahead and take a roll call vote.
Melvoin Benson.
Yes, give him a chance.
Don Bascardin.
Yes.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
William Mudge.
Yes.
Kimberly Page.
No.
Richard Welsh.
No.
Linda Avanzado.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2.
All right. The next thing we have on our agenda that we need to talk about tonight is item C. There's the resolution of contract continuation, the House Bill 7250. Tim Duffy, who is our school committee
Executive Director of Rhode Island Association of
Thank
School
you.
Committees.
Yes, he is the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Association of School Committees, has given us a draft that he would hope that we would all take and support, saying that we do not support this bill. I'm looking for a motion from the school committee.
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to say we do not support this bill. Is there any further discussion?
Yes?
Yes, Mr. Mudge.
I looked at that, and I think there is some merit to this, and I think we ought to have some discussion at some point in time regarding this amendment. So I'm going to vote no on the fact that we need to discuss much more on this. And by the way, I would also like to comment that it's a good motion. It's going, whether you like it or not, going before the General Assembly. But I would ask, where's our motion? We asked our representatives to do it. I haven't seen our motion to go to the General Assembly to alleviate us from the provision of providing for charter schools. I hope nobody's trying to kill that. Thank you.
Mrs. Benson?
Mr. Mudge, as I've said many times before, charter schools are state law. You call the education department, they'll say Rhode Island Department of Education and charter schools. Charter schools are recognized by the federal government as being part of the education system. Why do we want to send letters going against something that is sanctioned and state law? The legislature did it last year, approved that charter schools be included in public education.
May I comment?
Let's keep we have a motion on the table to support the resolution. So let's keep our comments only if we're going to support the resolution or not. Mr. Cerisi.
Motion to end debate and call a question, please.
Second. Okay, we have a motion to end debate. Lorraine, could we take a roll call vote?
William Mudge.
No.
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Richard Welsh.
Yes.
Linda Avanzado. Belvoid Benson.
And this is for the letter concerning the charter
No, this
schools.
is the motion to end debate.
In debate. Yes.
John Biscardin.
No.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2.
Okay, Lorraine, could you please call the question?
This is on the resolution.
Correct.
Kimberly Page.
Resolution against contract, could you just explain it a little bit, please?
Please.
Yes, this is a resolution against contract continuation.
Thank you.
It's Bill number 7250 in the State House.
Call the roll, please.
Page.
Yes.
I have a question to ask.
But we're only voting on the motion right now.
Yes, but I have a question to ask.
I'm sorry.
I
This
know
is the time.
what the bill is. I've read it.
So, I'm just saying,
Okay.
it's all we do is vote on the
You
motion.
have it your way.
Richard Welsh.
Okay, I know
Yes.
what the bill is.
Linda Avanzado.
Yes?
Melvoy Benson.
No.
John Biscardin.
I have to abstain because I really don't understand what this is all about. So I have to, out of ignorance, I abstain.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
William Mudge.
I abstain also, same reasons Mr. Scott did.
Motion passes 4-1 with 2 abstentions.
Thank you very much. We are at 10 o'clock, but Dr. Ajay, is there anything that you want us to cover about the 2011-2012 budget? And about the DMS roof proposal?
I'd like to ask Mr. Draper if he could kind of fill us in on where we are with the budget, the current budget and the roof proposal and the current latest meeting of the facility subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, regarding the 2012 budget, at present, I believe we mentioned earlier in the meeting, we're looking at about a $300,000 deficit based on the current projections. We are making up ground with vacancies. We're making up ground with a mild winter. and we're trying to do what we can as far as adjusting for operations. So far, things are trending in the correct direction. As far as the Davisville Middle School roof, we met with the facility subcommittee. At that time, it was unanimous direction to go with a publicly bid RFP for our architectural services. I have also spoken with Department of Ed in regards to that process. They do require a building commissioning agent. And what that means is we'd be basically looking at 3 separate vendors. One vendor would design the bid documents and assist us in the architectural and design piece of it. A building commissioning agent or a clerk of the works could be utilized to assure the state that the project is done to RIDE requirements as well as to meet the contract specifications. And then obviously there'd be the construction vendor who'd be installing the product. So that's the process. I also asked about compensation from the state, the reimbursement rate. Through 2012, which is June 30, 2012, a 40% reimbursement rate is available. After that, it's subject to legislation. I believe in the initial documentation, 30% was listed. The fact of the matter is, we believe it'll end up somewhere between the 30 and 40%, but that's subject to legislative approval. So the conservative estimate right now is 30%. The aggressive estimate would be 40%. And as far as being on track to complete it this summer, we had a discussion with the town manager regarding other funding options, which would be the use of fund balance or some combination, and we're going to wait and see how this whole process plays out.
Couple of questions, please.
Yes, I want, the first, I want Mr. Welch, why don't you give us, we're at the State House today, so why don't you give us an update on how things have been going with our bond?
The bond has passed the House Finance and went on the floor and passed on the House side. Today, it went before the Senate Finance. I do not know what the outcome of that is, but if they pass it, hopefully the Senate will pass it on Thursday, which will then mean that we should have the authority to go to the Secretary of State, or the town goes to the Secretary of State, and get a date for the referendum vote on the bond.
Thank you. Mr. Mudge, you have a question?
Yeah, a couple with regard to that. If there was a proposal, and I think it should be considered, taking the money out of the capital the town's general fund balance.
That comes before the town council on December 13th.
No, I understand.
If they're considering that.
I know, but I'm asking.
February 13th.
Asking a question, and I think I asked this question a couple of months ago, is I think that has some merit. Well, first of all, with respect to the roof, I think we all are in agreement we need to do the roof. And the question is then, as far as the school committee should be concerned, is, and notwithstanding the other items in the bond, how do we get the roof done, and we work a strategy on how to do that. I don't care how the town council funds that, whether they want to put a bond out for that, or they want to use our fund balance. There are some merits going both ways. Of course, this extra 40% adds to that equation as well. My concern is that a $6.5 million bond is probably not going to go through. So my question would be, has anybody approached the state with regard to, if we fund this out of our local tax dollars, will that be eligible for the funding profile over a 4-year period of time? Because, an 8-year period of time. In other words, will we get state money if we do it with our own taxpayers' money? That's question A.
Only if it's through a vote.
Excuse me?
We will not get any state aid if it is because we fund it out of the town fund balance. We will only get state aid if after a vote, the townspeople approve the bond, and that's how we get it.
I'm asking for
Am I correct, Mr.
a legal opinion.
My understanding from the Department of Education is that if our capital reserve is funded and the bond is not, we would still be eligible for reimbursement.
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought
I
so.
see what
So,
you're saying.
yes.
All right.
So could just on record, could we get that in writing so, that, I hate to say it, but things change. On the other hand, the 40% I think is significant, and I'm wondering if the town council or whomever, we could go out for the bond for the $2 million it's going to cost us for this thing and worry about the other projects in the upcoming years, and that would be a significant proposal, I think.
Mrs. Avanzato.
Yes, I attended the facilities subcommittee meeting, and the town manager was there, and we discussed the possibility of reducing the bond, and he said that is not an option at this point in time. It's too late. It's been put in as a certain amount of money. However, that does not mean, because the bond goes for a certain amount, that we have to borrow all that money. We haven't done that with the previous bond. We still have $2 million that we never even borrowed because we didn't have projects that we could properly use it on, and that's what we would do in this instance as well. We just wouldn't use the money. But according to Mike Emery, we couldn't do that. We couldn't reduce the bond right now. We did ask about it.
Mr. Welch.
Well, one of the real quirks in this whole works is that the regents require the bond to go in front of the public within six months of when they approved the program. And the program was approved by regents November 3rd. So we have to have it in front of the voters, and the voters have to approve the bond by May 3rd. So we've been up against the wall to try and get this done.
Mrs. Benson.
The question I have to ask, and it's related to the bond, but first I'd like to ask,
Yes, Mrs. Benson.
Continue.
Mr. Superintendent, did you get an answer to your letter? I was waiting till you finish your conversation. Did you get an answer to the letter? I got a copy, an email copy of where you wrote the council and asked them if they would take care of the roof. Did you get an answer to that?
Mrs. Dolan got back to us, and she mentioned that this would be on their agenda on February 13th.
Okay, so we've gone too far.
Continue.
We've gone too far with putting the bond out because it's set in concrete, and because you got it and it's going to come out of the Senate, and it was voted on Thursday, Mr. Webb. I guess you was in your office. I didn't know you were a lobbyist up there. It was voted on Thursday, and we can have the referendum, but how will we change it if the council gives us the money?
We don't need it.
If the council gives us the money, then we don't have to take the vote. But
Say what? I can't hear you.
I said, if the council decides to give us the money, we don't need to take a vote. But that'll be the decision on the 13th.
I'm speaking about having the referendum.
We wouldn't be able to change the bond.
Mr. Cerisi.
And the
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the table and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, meeting
Have to go to
adjourned.
the-
Remind the committee that we do meet on Monday, December 13th. We have a long executive session that day, so we'll probably be meeting at 6. We may be meeting until 8 before